StarCraft, the Terran Empire. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1, Augustus Mengsk. Thanks for asking for help. I can't cross to a plane in the Korhal sector. Thank you, brother. These were the last words Shuhan heard before his eyes went dark. When he opened his eyes again, the computer desk and chair, along with the other furniture in the room, were gone. Instead, there was a mahogany round table carved with pastoral scenery and horseback hunting scenes. The table was filled with gold and silver cups, and the light emitted by two golden candelabra and crystal chandeliers complemented each other. Shuhan sat on a finely crafted chair. On the table in front of him was a folded white tablecloth, a glass of sparkling rosé wine and mushroom risotto, and on the beautifully decorated plate was a cut, sauced charcoal grilled steak and a small poultry cooked to a shiny finish. What luxurious furniture and luxurious furnishings this was. The floor was covered with colorful felt carpets of various sizes, and none of them was not made of exquisite materials, and was meticulously crafted. Velvet, damask and silk hung from the walls, and on them hung portraits of family ancestors with gold ribbons. Guardian of Korhal, Imperial Wolf Pack, Mengsk family. Augustus, you know how much effort your mother put into this dinner. Don't ruin it. The stern male voice brought Shuhan back to reality from his trance. He looked up at the other side of the table. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man with dark gray hair, gray sideburns and beard. His sideburns were grey, and he spoke with a strange accent, but it didn't seem awkward. Shuhan quickly realized that this was not Chinese but English, but suddenly, English was as familiar to him as his mother tongue. Shuhan took a glance and immediately lowered his head, picked up the knife and fork, and naturally dealt with the food on the plate. Obviously, in the eyes of others, he must have been in a daze for a long time. Feeling the fragrance between his teeth, Shuhan knew that, if all this was true, then thanks to a mouthful of poisonous milk from a certain Zudang elder mortal, he really traveled to the Korhal sector. At present, it seems that this is at least a decent middle-class family. When he lowered his head to enjoy the food, Shuhan behaved elegantly and self-possessed, and his movements of holding the knife and fork were skillful and without error. He did not use the corner of his eyes to look at other family members sitting at the table, but tried his best to recall the memory of this body after the crossing. Fortunately, although it was not complete, he still found some buried memories in a short time, and had a basic understanding of his current identity. Augustus Mengsk, a member of the Mengsk family, an elder family on Korhal IV, one of the 13 core planets in the territory of the Terran Federation. This is an ancient and prominent family. The founder and several generations of ancestors of the family have led the first colonists to overcome difficulties and build their homes in this beautiful world for hundreds of years. Augustus is the second son in the family, and his name comes from his grandfather. Augustus' father, Augustus Mengsk, is the current owner of the Mengsk family's various properties. He is also a member of the Korhal Parliament, enjoys a high prestige in the political arena, and has millions of loyal followers among the people. His mother is a strong and beautiful Korhal woman. Like the wives of other nobles and upper-class people on Korhal IV, Catherine Mengsk is good at taking care of housework, likes cooking and studying recipes, and is also the main funder of many charities. Augustus also has an older brother, Augustus Mengsk, who is the colonel commander of the 33rd Ground Assault Division of the Federal Marine Corps, and a 16-year-old sister, Dorothy Mengsk. He just graduated from the Stilling Academy in the capital city of Korhal IV this year, and just turned 18. It is the age of youth and frivolity. Compared with his outstanding brother and lovely sister, Augustus has caused his parents a lot of worry, and his record at Stilling Academy is full of bad deeds. Skipping classes, teasing the old-fashioned headmaster, beating up the principal who was corrupt, holding a magnetic levitation motorcycle race in the academy, illegally modifying the IAA advertising robot at the school gate, and having a barbecue at the graduation ceremony. This young and flamboyant nobleman showed his disregard for secular rules and authority. Augustus, we have been at war with Kel-morian for 2 years, and the situation is still unclear. The federal government of Tarsinus has lowered the minimum age for conscription several times. the UN and global news network, which are controlled by the corrupt federal creation families, are vague about the casualty figures, but they are promoting honor and sacrifice. The voice of his father Angus once again awakened Augustus from his memories. He seemed to be trying to create some topics to talk about with his rebellious son. The atmosphere of today's family dinner was very different from the family dinners that Augustus remembered in the past, which were polite, but also warm and harmonious. In the past, Angus would never bring political and business matters to the table, because the little Dorothy at home always had endless things to say. At this time, even Augustus, who was always restless, would patiently listen to her talk about her friends at school and the imaginative fairy tales she had woven. Augustus sensed something was wrong. When he looked up at his father's eyes and pretended to listen to him, he noticed that his mother and sister were also unhappy. In Augustus' memory, he had almost never seen his mother cry, and that was usually when they were separated by death. Augustus immediately searched his mind for information about the war his father was talking about. He keenly realized that this matter should be related to him. This was a full-scale war between the Terran Federation and its human regime, the Kel-morian Federation, which originated from the same source in the Korhal sector. The two sides fought for precious crystal mineral resources and colonies. So far, the war has affected more than a dozen marginal colonies with hundreds of millions of people, and millions of soldiers, miners, and civilians have died as a result. There is no sign that the full-scale war is about to end. Both the Terran Federation and the Kel-morian Federation have declared that they are in an absolute advantage. Only high-ranking federal officials like Angus knew that both sides had won and lost, and that they were evenly matched. The war had evolved from the initial local exchanges of fire to mutual bombardment between fleets, and even nuclear weapons were used. In order to win, the federal government was sending young people who were kept in the dark to the battlefield like a meat grinder. As a politician, Angus only showed his anger when he criticized corruption and argued for the interests of potential vote holders. The reason why he was so emotional today was that his second son was desperate to join the Federation Marine Corps like his brother, and tomorrow was when Augustus would leave for the boot camp. The Mengsk family had been trying to get Korhal out of the rule of the Terran Federation and achieve independence as an independent dominion rather than a colony. As a result, the Mengsk family had an irreconcilable contradiction with the federal government, and Augustus's move to join the federal army was undoubtedly a betrayal of his father's cause. The boot camp was far away in a remote colony several light years away from Korhal, which was at least a distant world that could only be reached by a spacecraft equipped with a warp drive and capable of long-distance jumps. Angus's second son was also going to leave him. It was not just that he might lose his heir. He loved every one of his children. This is the last time I tell you how cruel war is. It is not the childish games you played. Have pity on your family. When you made such a cold and heartless decision, your mother almost cried to death. Just as Augustus recalled all this, Angus continued. Beyond the wall we erected for you is a cruel world, and the battlefield is hell in the cruel world. It's all because you are used to a comfortable life. You do whatever you want, and you don't care. God, I wish you could show even a little regret. Augustus was shocked. You are crazy. You have a rich and unrestrained life as a nobleman, but how crazy are you to want to be a good brother of $50? This is a fan fiction, based on the worldview of StarCraft. The worldview of StarCraft is a combination of background stories from games, official books, peripheral chess pieces and boards, interviews, and Q&As, etc. I don't seek to write a book with the rigor of writing a historical article, but only to try my best to restore a little bit of this StarCraft world that I like. Chapter 2 Family Korhal World. After the family dinner, Augustus returned to his room from the restaurant, using the excuse that he needed to rest early. The manor house built by the Mengsk family on the cliff has hundreds of beautifully decorated rooms. Corridors with mahogany floors and stairs covered with expensive carpets connect the various halls and floors together, and are maintained daily by more male servants, maids and gardeners than rooms. Augustus shuttled through the corridors with golden framed portraits of Mengsk family ancestors on the walls according to his memory. He climbed the cherrywood stairs to enter the floor with bedrooms and paper libraries, and finally stopped in front of a room with a copper plaque with the word AU nailed on the door with golden rivets. Under the copper plaque was a propaganda poster of the Terran Confederation Marine Corps. The background of the poster was the surface of the moon planet covered with craters, and the sky above was the dark deep space. Several handsome and beautiful federal male and female officers like stars were standing on a high sand dune. They showed a formulaic and brilliant smile and gathered together, each reaching out to hold a flag fluttering in the wind. A fake and ridiculous show. Even if it is a composite picture, it is 10,000 times more real than this. This is what the original Augustus said about this poster. But despite this, he still posted it on the door, just to prove to his father his determination to join the army. Next to Augustus' room is the bedroom of Arcturus and Dorothy. The door of the former's room is only engraved with the same copper plate with the English letters R on it, and the latter has an abstract purple pony painted on her door. There are no door handles or keychains on all the doors. Where the handles should have been, there is a square groove with a side length of about 2 inches and a depth of 1 inch. Standing at the door, Augustus thought carefully for a moment, then he stretched out his right index finger and inserted it into the groove. The head card engraved with English letters immediately turned over, and a small round camera protruded from the door and projected a holographic projection screen with a bright blue background in front of him. The screen flashed with the following words: facial recognition has been completed. Fingerprint recognition has been completed. Iris recognition has been completed. Genetic recognition has been completed. Records uploaded. 24-hour gene database refreshed. Unlocked. Time March 25th, 2488, 2237. This is the world of StarCraft, a future world of the 25th century. Modern people may have no advantages here. Augustus pushed open the automatically unlocked door and walked into the bedroom. He turned on the ceiling lamp, and the soft white light shone through the hollow ceiling with white patterns, immediately illuminating the entire bedroom. The furnishings in the bedroom were not luxurious. There was a bronze-framed lattice window on the wall opposite the door. Through the glass of the window, one could see the huge courtyard of the holiday villa. In the courtyard were lush gardens and gardens under the lights. These evergreen plants were full of vitality and fragrant. A series of fine gravel roads separated the green world and led to the building where servants and guards lived. Outside the fence, the wider and straighter asphalt road led directly to the apron where the cold grey near-Earth spacecraft was parked, and the underground garage filled with various suspended cars and armored vehicles. The other 2 walls each have a single bed and a bookshelf full of books. Next to the bookshelf are some guns, including muzzle-loading guns like handicrafts, semi-automatic weapons from the colonial era, and the latest electromagnetic guns. The original Augustus loved guns very much, not just for collection, but also for the skillful use of these weapons. This is one of the reasons why Augustus wanted to join the army. If his brother Arcturus wanted to be an explorer, then Augustus' dream was to become a general who traveled across the galaxy. Augustus lay in bed and began to think about everything he would face in the future. Augustus Mengsk did not exist in the original story. The Angus family originally had only 1 son and 1 daughter, and no second son. Rather than saying that he replaced Augustus, it is better to say that this character exists because of his own crossing. The identity of a noble can at least bring some advantages to Augustus. In the cruel worldview of StarCraft, crossing at such a time with such an identity is actually not the worst. Since Arcturus, the eldest son of the Mengsk family, had joined the Federation Marine Corps and had not returned to Korhal for more than 8 years, Augustus' parents also had many disagreements on the education of their only remaining son. Angus did not want all his sons to join the army, so Augustus eventually failed to complete his studies at the Stealing Military Academy and had to transfer to a university funded by the family. After Augustus joined the army without telling his parents, he could only start as a recruit. The Terran Federation implements a recruitment system and does not force conscription from all walks of life, but after signing up and passing a series of enlistment tests, refusing to serve in the military will be considered a deserter. Due to the decreasing number of enlistments, this provision was not written into federal law until the past 2 years. The good news is that it is now 2488, and it will take more than a decade before humans first come into contact with the other 2 alien races in the StarCraft worldview, the Protoss and the Zerg, so Augustus will not encounter any incredible monsters for the time being. regardless of the butterfly effect of the time traveler, which caused the first contact between humans and alien races to be brought forward. Augustus would not encounter the Zerg or Protoss before he fulfilled his military service contract and successfully discharged from the army. Moreover, his brother Arcturus is now a colonel in the Federation Army. In the email he sent last week, he bluntly stated that Augustus would be transferred to his own unit after the training of new recruits was completed. Augustus sighed, stood up and walked to a floor-length mirror, facing his appearance after the time travel for the first time. The mirror reflected Augustus' handsome face, which was one of the proofs that he had the noblest and most ancient bloodline of the Terran human race. Like all the men in the Mengsk family, Augustus was very handsome. He had high cheekbones, a nose with a hawk-like curve, and a pair of bright and sharp cold grey eyes. His fluffy dark grey short hair was neatly groomed. Ordinary, okay, Mengsk. Augustus whispered this ancient and noble surname softly. In the factories, affiliated cities and towns built by the Mengsk family on Korhal, they are like real royal family. However, Augustus clearly remembers that in the background of the game, because his father Angus deliberately rebelled and wanted to lead Korhal to overthrow the rule of the Terran Federation, all the Mengsk family members, except the eldest son Arcturus, were later assassinated by 3 Terran Federation ghost agents. As for the specific time, Augustus didn't know. By then, would he be able to prevent the tragedy from happening? Of course, as a time traveler, Augustus also had reasons to ignore these and hide far away. Dong dong. At this time, Augustus suddenly heard the sound of the doorbell ringing, and the information processor behind the door showed that the person outside was his sister Dorothy. Augustus hesitated for a moment, walked over and opened the fingerprint lock on the door. A girl with a silver grey ponytail walked in. She was wearing a lavender home dress, and her bright cold grey eyes flickered. Her expression was so helpless, and her sad eyes clenched Augustus' heart in an instant. In an instant, many memories flashed through Augustus' mind like an electric current. Compared with the eldest son in the family, Arcturus, who was already 28 years old, the age difference between him and his sister was not that big. Augustus spent a happy childhood with Dorothy, watching her grow from a little boy dragging a pony doll to a graceful young girl. Augustus. Dorothy walked towards Augustus with her head down, and suddenly hit him in the stomach with her head. They said you might die. I promise you, I will never die. Augustus said. You must write me a letter every week from now on. Dorothy raised her head, and a layer of mist covered her beautiful cold grey eyes. Augustus could not find any reason to refuse his sister. Okay, he said. Welcome to Invest. Chapter 3, Star Marines. The Mengsk family's escort convoy, with its golden wolf head emblem, passed through the magnificent walls left over from the colonial era, and entered the city of Stilling, the capital of Korhal, along the wide circular driveway to the recruitment center set up by the Terran Federation Interstellar Marines in the city. The sky was immediately covered by the shadows of high-rise buildings and the flash of glass. The convoy, consisting of vulture motorcycles and armored vehicles, seemed to be traveling in a canyon crack made of steel and glass. The number of cars that touched the ground and hovered in the lane gradually increased, and there was an endless stream of people. Augustus' expression was still as calm as water, but he was amazed at the city's sense of technology and prosperity. It was morning in Stilling, and the sidewalks on both sides of the road were full of people in formal suits and work clothes, as well as IAA cleaning robots and sales robots. In Stilling, when the sun rose, countless people were busy running for their dreams and families. This was the life of countless ordinary people who supported this prosperous world. A holographic projection screen of a skyscraper belonging to the Global News Network was playing dazzling luxury goods advertisements, ranging from art treasures made of gold, silver and rare materials, to long dresses endorsed by celebrities. The armored vehicle slowed down when passing Stilling College, and Angus deliberately asked the driver to slow down. The Dean of Studies and the Dean and Vice Dean of Stilling College have wanted to expel you many times, saying that you disrupted the teaching order and violated the school rules and regulations. Angus looked out the window at Stilling's marble walls and majestic gates covered with dark purple vines. When the crowd near the college looked at the armored vehicle, Angus waved his hand and showed a politician's signature smile on his face. Those teachers had nothing more to teach me a long time ago. Augustus recalled his usual rhetoric in the past and pretended to be indifferent and disdainful. Staying in their classes just to graduate is just a waste of life. And weren't those co-directors and deans fired by you? After nearly 200 years and more than a dozen generations of accumulation, the Mengsk family's industries spread throughout Stilling and other prosperous cities in Korhal. Angus was also the main investor in Stilling College, the most prestigious institution of higher learning in Korhal. Those teachers and administrators were actually working only for him. That's all because these people look glamorous on the surface, but secretly they are embezzling and taking bribes. Angus said, "No matter what, I hope that your time in the academy will be a wonderful memory in your life." So Augustus turned his head and looked at Stilling Academy. On the green lawn behind the grey railings, with the grey granite clock tower, the statues of historical greats, the fountain and the flower beds behind them, the young and beautiful first-year students in slim dresses were practicing elegant light swordsmanship under the guidance of the swordsmanship teacher, with light steps and gorgeous moves. Augustus was not good at swordsmanship, but his brother, the eldest son of the Mengsk family, Augustus Mengsk, loved cold weapons. Augustus always did his best in what he loved. He was a swordsmanship master who became famous at a young age. He learned swordsmanship not to kill the enemy, but to temper his will. The first year students seemed elegant, but they could only get a weak evaluation from their brother. After staying on the girl's snow-white thighs for a while, Augustus withdrew his eyes at the right time. "It's not too bad," Augustus said. "Protect yourself." Angus suddenly said something that had nothing to do with the previous topic, but he changed his words and said, "Limited by experience, young people will always take some detours. But one day, you will return to the right path. The people of the Mengsk family are born to accomplish great things." Augustus nodded in response. Not far from the academy is the recruitment center set up by the federal government in Stilling City, which is located in the best area of Queens. The recruitment center is a cold alloy steel structure. A red and blue flag flutters in the wind on the top of the recruitment center. On the bright red flag, there is a diagonal cross composed of blue diagonal lines, and the diagonal cross is dotted with many white star symbols. At the arched frame gate of the recruitment center stood two federal soldiers wearing light blue power armor and holding rifles. They have a more familiar name: Federal Marines. The chest, back, shoulders, upper arms, forearms, thighs, calves and buttocks of the two Federal Marines were covered with extremely thick exoskeleton armor. The footrests had a larger contact area with the ground, anti-fall boots with claws, and orange matte helmets. These exoskeleton armor parts were connected by screws, capacitive servos and tactile feedback systems. They had built-in life support devices, and the servo motor group allowed the Marines wearing power armor to pick up heavy weapons, such as AGR Gauss rifles. CMC 200 power armor. Before the Kel-morian War, this model of power armor was hailed as an epoch-making progress in Terran military industry. This reliable individual armor is still very popular among federal soldiers even today, when CMC 300 came out and shined. Of course, in some more remote colonized planets and fringe worlds, the sheriffs there are still using some older power armor models and gunpowder weapons from centuries ago. When wearing power armor, the height of federal soldiers is far beyond the average height of normal car men, a full 8 feet tall, and much more burly. In front of the 6-foot-tall Augustus, they were like giants. The convoy slowly stopped, and teams of security personnel wearing dark brown uniforms and holding plasma rifles filed down from the armored vehicles, shouting away the crowd and setting up cordons. Field, the captain of the Mengsk family's guard, rolled down from a vulture motorcycle and personally opened the door for Angus and his family. Just as Augustus was about to get out of the car, a pair of soft little hands held Augustus' face from behind. The little girl stood behind the back of Augustus' seat and bent down to bury her face between her brother's right half of his face and shoulder. "Augustus," Dorothy whispered, "you promised to write to me." Augustus' collar was soaked with Dorothy's tears in a few seconds. The little girl must have cried silently for a long time, with tears all over her face, but he just looked at the scenery outside the window and didn't notice it at all. An irrepressible sadness filled Augustus' heart. Although as a time traveler, he had no feelings for his family in the new world, the memories of the past still deeply affected him. Augustus knew that he could not ignore the crying of this little girl, who was the apple of the Mengsk family's eye. "I will, little one." Augustus continued to call his younger sister as his brother Arcturus called him. "I will send you an ML every week." Augustus stood up, leaned over and kissed Dorothy's smooth forehead. Then he smiled with a gentle expression. But this smile, that once fascinated many lovely girls in Steel Academy, soon froze. Augustus saw his mother with a distorted face, and about to collapse. "Augustus, my child." Catherine suddenly hugged Augustus, her shoulders twitching constantly, and she was almost speechless. "Thinking back to the first time I saw you, it seemed like a lifetime ago." The mother's emotions stabilized a little, from crying loudly to sobbing with a trembling voice. "You must be strong, and learn to respect everyone who will fight alongside you in the future. Maybe one day, you will become the leader of these people, and lead them to the end of the starry sea, to a place we can no longer see. But remember, Korhal will always be your home. Forgive your father, we will always love you." I changed the name to StarCraft, Terran Empire. Adding keywords may make it easier to search. Miserable. Chapter 4 Guild War. Augustus got off the armored vehicle, hugged his family members one by one, and swore to them that he would return alive. Then he waved goodbye until the Mengsk family's convoy gradually went away. After the convoy became a string of black dots in the distance, Augustus dragged the suitcase with a genetic identification lock to the bronze door of the recruitment center. "Sir, I guess you must be here to join the glorious Federation Marine Corps." One of the Federation Marines looked at Augustus with a formal smile on his face. "We fight for the Federation," another soldier said later. "Yes, I have passed all the tests and qualification reviews. Today is the day for new recruits to report. Where can I see the recruiter?" Augustus frowned. The bronze door of the recruitment center was open, and the lobby was decorated as magnificently as an opera house, but there was no one. Years of war have dragged the Terran Federation into a quagmire. The economy is sluggish, the living standards of citizens have dropped rapidly, and the military participation rate has dropped to the lowest point, especially in Ka, which has always longed for independence, and is extremely hostile to the federal government. It is generally believed that only hopeless social dregs, homeless vagrants and criminals will join the Federal Marine Corps. "From now on, we are comrades," the Marine said. "Turn left and go to the 4th room." After entering the door, "The commander is waiting for you." Augustus nodded and was about to leave. The two Marines looked at a young man who was walking hurriedly behind him and said, "Sir, I guess you must be here to join the glorious Federal Marine Corps. We fight for the Federation." This made Augustus feel a little strange. Not only did the two people say exactly the same thing, but even their tone was exactly the same as before. This weird feeling would never go away, as if they were NPCs in a game, and would only speak according to a preset program. Augustus hoped that this was just his illusion. According to the soldier's words, Augustus walked through the gate and the vestibule into a long corridor, and met his recruiting officer at the recruitment office numbered 404. The recruiting officer, who was wearing a dark blue uniform and a golden medal of bravery on his chest, was a young officer. The rank on his chest showed that he was a lieutenant. The lieutenant had a pair of cold blue eyes and neat short blonde hair, with a scar at the corner of his eye that was difficult to notice. The federal officer had been staring at Augustus since he entered the room. After taking the file with the federal emblem on the cover, the lieutenant flipped through it and put it away. The second son of the famous Senator Augustus Mengsk, a top student of Steeling College in Korhal. "You are equivalent to a pass to enter government departments, major intergalactic companies and super enterprises. To be honest, this is the first time I have seen a noble like you join the army. Korhal is not like Tarsinus. There are very few nobles who follow the ancient tradition of letting their family children join the army. What made you willing to give up a bright future and choose to become an ordinary marine?" He looked at Augustus and asked. "To protect all mankind." Augustus shrugged and said, "Mr. Augustus Mengsk, I promise that you will never regret joining the Federation Marine Corps. For a long time, we have been traveling in the vast sea of stars, exploring one unknown and mysterious world after another. We fight against alien beasts, Kel-morians and Humagins, and protect the people of marginal colonies and their precious private property." The officer nodded, approving Augustus' answer. "It's a romantic and glorious profession." Unfortunately, when it comes to killing people, it's neither glorious nor romantic. Augustus paused and said. The officer smiled and didn't argue, but then his expression gradually became serious. He cleared his throat and said, listen, kid. The Federal Marine Corps adheres to 3 principles: strength, pride and discipline. We fight to protect the interests of all Terrans. Normally, the Marines follow the colonial fleet, but after the shameless Kel-morians tore up the trade agreement, we had to switch to fighting their army organized by miners and farmers. We will win this just war. Augustus gave an awkward but decent smile. He knew how the war happened. Although it was the Kel-morians who started the war, the Terrans were not necessarily victims who had to take up arms to resist. In fact, the fuse of the war came from the domineering behavior of the Terran Federation. The federal parliament had instructed the Marines to seize the crystal deposits that had been discovered by the Kel-morian exploration team and the private mines far away from their home star world. A large number of Kel-morian miners and exploration team members would be sent to the court of the Federation planet, tried according to the laws of the Federation, and then sent to prison on trumped-up charges. Next, those mineral veins were assigned to the names of the ancient creation families and new nobles in the federal parliament. Okay, let's go to the helipad on the top floor. You'll be transported by the latest Apod 33 transport ship, which is equipped with a curvature engine, and will reach the planet, where the recruit training camp is located, in just a few days. The lieutenant looked at his watch and said, we will set off at 2 p.m. Your spaceship is a 089 ship of this model. The ground crew and mechanics call her the Dove of Peace. Be sure to check it. No one will tell you the way. When Augustus walked into the terminal, there were only a few dozen recruits sitting sparsely on the hundreds of seats. They had not yet changed into military uniforms, and were dressed in a variety of different clothes. The only thing they had in common was a young and energetic face. Augustus walked while observing these people's clothes and expressions calmly. After all, these people might become his comrades in the future. Most people were leaning over and staring at the all-in-one personal terminals similar to mobile phones, spending the boring time waiting for the spacecraft to take off on virtual games, e-novels, virtual singers and the like. Augustus even recognized a classmate from middle school among them, but he did not say hello to him. Augustus could tell at a glance that some of the others came from the bottom of society. Losers in life are the children of the losers. These people's clothes were made of the cheapest industrial fibers, and there was not a single piece of electronic product on their bodies. Most of them had depressed faces and dull eyes. Soldiers, assemble immediately and enter the boarding platform from Channel 4. Just when Augustus was about to find a place to sit down, a rough man's voice suddenly sounded in the hall. Follow the instructions on the platform to find your spaceship, and don't run around. Otherwise, the guards will blow the heads of you hairless donkeys. Didn't we agree on 2 points? There was a commotion in the hall. Some people rolled up their sleeves and repeatedly checked their mechanical watches in disbelief. The tile floor of the waiting hall suddenly rang with the uncomfortable sound of shoes rubbing against each other. Augustus walked quickly through the passage to the landing platform. As soon as he walked out of the passage, the roar of the spacecraft engine, the strong wind and the smell of engine oil baked in the sun immediately hit him head on. While running towards his own spacecraft, Augustus caught a glimpse of many old antique spacecraft that were about to be scrapped, and several scarred galaxy jumpers. The original memory told Augustus that the Terran Federation was still using old model transport ships from decades ago to transport soldiers. As long as these spacecraft did not crash or lose some key parts during the flight, they would never be retired. And his father Angus had mentioned the corruption of the Tarsinus Terran Federation Council countless times. The assets controlled by the creation families who controlled the entire Federation through the council were enough to fill the Endorian trench in Korhal, but they were still greedily exploiting the people. Fortunately, Augustus did not have to worry about his spaceship disintegrating on the spot after entering the subjump channel. Just as his recruiting officer said, the spaceship transporting the new recruits was brand new and shiny. At least it looked much safer than scrap metal. The signed contract has been sent out. Please feel free to read it. Chapter 5 Boot Camp. From the perspective of the noble Augustus, the passenger cabin of this transport ship can only be described as simple. The not so wide cabin was filled with recruits from all over Korhal. The young people in the capital stealing city, always had an indescribable sense of superiority in their every move. The recruits in the ocean city of Aurora had an indelible salty smell. Wolf was an industrial city that rose up relying on the mines. The men who came out of there were all big and strong. Although he was the son of a senator, Augustus did not receive any special treatment in the army. Although Augustus Mengsk had a powerful hand in the political circles of Korhal, the federal government would never let him interfere in military affairs. After all, Angus could be said to have single-handedly provoked the enthusiasm of the Korhal people for rebellion and independence. In this case, Augustus had to worry about whether he would be targeted in the army. As for naked persecution, or taking the opportunity to kill Augustus, the federal government should not do so for the time being. Nowadays, people are talking about Augustus Mengsk's hypocrisy on major social platforms, at gatherings of old nobles and famous entrepreneurs, and in the salons of noble ladies. In public and in speeches, Angus screamed at the corruption of the Terran Federation, and called on the Korhal people to resist brutal rule and exploitation, but secretly sent both of his sons to the Federation Marine Corps. People think that Angus is obviously making preparations for both sides, inciting the emotions of the people, and promoting his company's products to make amazing profits, while expressing loyalty to the Federation, and leaving a way out for himself. This is also the reason why Angus was furious about Augustus joining the army. His two sons, let alone wanting to become his successors, not only did not support his career, but also did some rebellious things that made their blood pressure soar. It can be seen from the fact that Augustus Mengsk, as the eldest son and heir of the Mengsk family, was not excluded, but also rose step by step in the army. The Terran Federation is happy to use this as material to attack his father. After everyone boarded the transport ship, a recruiting sergeant walked into the cabin and boarded the cabin ladder. Boys, in the recruit training camp on SYNOPSIS II, you will become the bravest warriors in the entire galaxy. The recruiting sergeant grinned and looked at the excited new recruits and reservists. The glorious and great military camp is waiting for you. SYNOPSIS II? Isn't that a war zone? The recruit training camp should be on an unaffected planet. A recruit who was dressed decently screamed, "Shut up, you piece of shit." The recruiting sergeant's face changed, and a bunch of extremely vulgar and uncultured words popped out of his mouth, which Augustus thought were extremely vulgar and uncultured, including many marginal worldly words that he couldn't understand at all. "Listen, girls." The sergeant pointed at the recruit's freckled nose and said, "The generals in the command system unanimously agreed that actual combat should also be part of the training of new recruits. When you live to retire, run to your mother's arms and cry. The army wants real warriors, not fucking losers." It seems that the situation on the front line has become so urgent. The serious reduction in personnel and the shortage of manpower have forced the army to deploy untrained recruits to the war zone in advance to maintain their control and military deterrence in the war zone. When the engine of the spacecraft made a deafening roar, Augustus thought about this and tied himself to the uncomfortable acceleration seat with a seat belt like other nervous recruits to prevent himself from breaking his neck by hitting the bulkhead when the spacecraft made an interstellar jump. The last to board were two jump engine technicians. The peace stove transport ship retracted the spiral staircase, cargo hold and landing gear. The four giant downward air jets on the side and tail of the ship burst into hot and bright light, sending the peace stove to an altitude of 4,000 feet. Then the jet further folded and rotated, facing the rear, and the transport ship carrying Augustus soon turned into a light spot deep into deep space. This transport ship capable of deep space travel was manufactured by the interstellar port of the Bennett Group. It can carry about 3,000 soldiers and the corresponding weapons and supplies. Now Augustus speculated that at least 5,000 people were stuffed on it because some unlucky guys were tied to the aisle at his feet. After a dizzying feeling of weightlessness, the Peace Dove entered a stable sub-transition orbital operation state. After confirming that there were no officers around, Augustus chatted with the recruits around him. During this period, Augustus concealed his noble identity very well, and the clothes he wore were only the cheapest ones in his wardrobe, but others could still judge from his clothes that his family was either rich or noble. Just that pair of brand name shoes was worth at least 200 credit coins, and this was just the price in the stilling black market. After getting it to the slum store for a facelift and repackaging, the price would be several times higher. This amount of money was enough for an ordinary slum family to buy food for 2 weeks. If Augustus walked in the streets of the slums or even ordinary residential areas wearing this, some desperate people would knock him unconscious and drag him into a dark alley, and they would not even leave him a pair of underwear. Augustus, who had never been in contact with the civilian class, was not clear about all this, but he still made up a vivid identity to make the recruits around him believe it. They all believed that Augustus was the child of a merchant family that once had some assets, but was on the verge of bankruptcy due to war and asset taxes. Augustus' handsome appearance and gentle and humorous conversation quickly established a central position in this temporary small circle. He only talked about the opportunity to join the army briefly, and everyone told them all about their experience of joining the army and everything they knew. Some of them were attracted by the recruitment advertisements and their own documentary propaganda, and they yearned for military life. Some were the children of miners on marginal planets. His parents died at the hands of the Kel-morians. This year, he just passed the minimum age for joining the army. Some people were gangsters who lived on smuggling and selling in the Victoria Street of Stilling before joining the army. They joined the army just because their daughter was seriously ill, in order to get the federal enlistment fee of $5,000, monthly salary and soldier allowance. Before joining the army, this evil street gang leader had already written a suicide note. Since then, Augustus has a general understanding of the life of the civilian class in the Terran Federation. It cannot be said that the people are living in poverty, at least most people's lives are guaranteed. But as the war continued, the federal government increased various taxes and raised the tax rates of consumption tax, income tax and other basic tax items. Corrupt officials and the founding families and big chaebols who secretly controlled the federal world exploited and made a fortune in the name of war, and more fathers and mothers could only work hard to earn more bread to fill their children's stomachs. As for the generous enlistment fee and the temptation of fame and fortune of the Federal Marine Corps, more people who were desperate chose to join the army. Augustus then played a poker game with the other recruits that they had never heard of, and won a lot of money from these unlucky guys. Time passed quietly amid Augustus' hearty laughter and the frustrated curses of others. At 4 AM local time, the Peace Dove exited the hyperspace jump orbit and entered the double orbit of a dark green gas giant companion planet, landing in the Starship port of the Federation Interstellar Supply Station on its 7th satellite. Before the maintenance technicians filled the Peace Dove's fuel tanks and repainted the wings, the caring captain and sergeant major allowed the recruits to stay in the bars and restaurants of the supply port and hope that they would spend all the salary that had not yet been pocketed. Augustus returned all the money he won and used part of the 60,000 credit coins given by his mother before leaving to treat all the recruits in his cabin to a big meal. The status has been changed. Those who gave rewards can go now. Ha 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 ha. The helmsman will add more chapters. Each helmsman will release a chapter. After all, I write very slowly and can't accumulate much. Chapter 6 Telesis. This is Telesis 2nd, a hell on earth, a place abandoned by God, and the worst war ruins in the entire Kaprulu sector. But bad boys, if you like fighting, then congratulations, you have come to the right place. In a frontline fortress called Telesis Main Force in the northern hemisphere of Telesis 2nd, Augustus was standing on the fixed platform of the fortress's huge underground hangar, and was inspected and lectured by a non-commissioned officer with other recruits who had just walked towards the Peace Dove transport ship. About 200 recruits stood with their feet apart, their hands behind their backs, lined up in front of the non-commissioned officer, and looked forward without moving. As new recruits, the reason why they could still stand so neatly was because the non-commissioned officer was constantly using his steel-hard elbows and pointed leather boots to gently help them correct their standing posture. At the same time, transport planes were still landing on the runway, one after another, almost without interruption. The underground hangar was more extensive than any 21st century airport Augustus had ever seen. At the end of the steel platform were densely packed dome buildings that were distributed like ants at the end of the field of vision. All the buildings were square and precise, with no difference in angles, which was the standard architectural style of the Federal Marine Corps. The building materials of the buildings came from a monopoly interstellar construction company. The modular assembly line building modules could be airdropped to the front line via large low-orbit transport ships with great efficiency, and then the space construction vehicles of the Airborne Engineer Corps would tightly assemble the modules together. It only took one day for a planetary fortress and its several mile-long affiliated industrial buildings and high-energy gas refineries to rise from the ground under the eyes of the Kel-morians. At ease, look up. The sergeant was a short woman with a serious expression and short brown hair. She was about 5.5 feet tall, only slightly taller than Peter, the shortest member of this temporary training company. No one dared to look down on this sergeant. When she walked past them, the soldiers all tightened their buttocks. Augustus had already changed into the training uniform issued to him like the other soldiers. This dark brown camouflage vest designed for the sandy terrain of SYNOPSIS was known for its reliability and wear resistance. Soldiers were required to tuck into the Tarsinus paratrooper trousers tied with nylon belts. The recruits wore matching sandy brown combat boots and long-brimmed flat caps. Augustus was the only recruit who was not criticized or beaten by the sergeant, probably thanks to his standard standing posture like a benchmark from beginning to end, and his natural military momentum. He seemed to be born to be a soldier. At the same time, everyone also received an M1 backpack, 2 electromagnetic grenades, Gauss grenades, pig-handled personal information collection system terminal, water bottle and Marine Corps rations, including energy bars, and mashed potato-like liquid food that can provide a large amount of energy and protein in a short period of time, as well as other easy-to-store biscuits and pies. These dozens of kilograms of equipment were hung on the soldiers' bodies and in the large B-2 backpacks. Augustus believed that their first training project after the sergeant finished the lecture was a 10-kilometer cross-country run. The recruit sergeant was not responsible for their recruit training. Her task was only to temporarily gather these recruits who were like headless flies when they were freed from their shackles and tell them everything they were about to face. After that, the recruits from Korhal IV will be reorganized and trained together with the recruits from Tarsinus, Antigua, Shalok, Terran III, 8th, 9th and Marcera. Due to the growing rebellion momentum of Korhal, even though the Terran Federation government was still accepting Korhal soldiers, they were still cautious to avoid putting all Korhal soldiers into the same battalion or even company and platoon to prevent them from forming an independent group. The Terran Federation Marine Security Department has always believed that the Korhal revolutionaries are or have infiltrated the Great Federation Marine Corps combat sequence, although they have never obtained any solid evidence. The Terran Federation Marine Corps has always been synonymous with bravery. Major Mibaka, who is in charge of recruit training, believes that we should build a recruit training camp on the front line to adapt to this special period. We also believe that the soldiers who graduate here will be better than those in other training camps. Although they were trying to hold back the discomfort, no one was ignorant enough to raise inappropriate questions or sneers. The 12-week military training can train you to be the best warriors in the entire Terran Federation. Here, you must learn how to use your guns and armor, otherwise the Kel-morians will use it for you. You must also memorize every rule and regulation of the Federation Marine Corps and implement them meticulously. Remember the authority of your superiors. If you can't do that, then you should at least remember the whistle of the military police, the sergeant said. The recruits laughed, but the laughter stopped like a duck being strangled by the neck under the sergeant's frozen expression. The Kel-morians are destroying our planet, and their galactic excavators are plundering all its resources and shipping them back to their home planet of Moria. The Kel-morians are the most notorious mineral locusts in the system, and their vile, greedy corrupt guild government intends to seize all the resources they can see in the Kaprulu sector. The sergeant looked back and forth at everyone's face, as if they had a dozen lice on their heads. I know that on your planet, food rationing and fuel quotas have become the norm, and it's all due to those Kel-morian bastards. I think you need to know that, if the Federation Marines are defeated, Moria's guild government will ride on the heads of all Terrans, and your parents and children will become laborers in the mines and personal slaves of the guild overlords, she said. The Kel-morians worship blood, and are obsessed with following ancient traditions in an almost rigid way. Under the rule of the Kel-morian Federation, the Terrans will undoubtedly become lowly fourth-class citizens. Augustus noticed a wave of uneasy agitation around him. At least in the eyes of many Terrans, the imminent resource shortage, deflation and high unemployment rate within the Terran Federation were all caused by the Kel-morians, not by the initiators of the war and the nobles and tycoons who pounced on the giant Terran Federation to suck blood. Just as the recruits were indignant, a group of dejected recruits walked past Augustus. There were about 30 of them, 2 of whom were carrying a bloody stretcher. The soldier on the stretcher was obviously also a recruit. He had not completed the change of clothes and was still wearing the clothes before joining the army. The medical soldier covered the recruit's face with a white blanket. Seeing all this, the recruits immediately realized sadly that someone had died on the first day of enlistment. The ship carrying them to land encountered a formation of 3 Kel-morian hellhounds. In the eyes of those sky wolves, even the transport ships with the strongest armor are a piece of fat meat. These recruits did not have the courage to ask why the Federation's Avengers did not escort the transport ships. Even though these fighters were about to be replaced by the latest Mirage fighters, they still had considerable mobility and firepower advantages when facing the Kel-morian hellhounds. Augustus noticed a young man with black hair. Among these low-spirited recruits, the young man did not stand out in terms of appearance or figure. Although they were all unranked recruits, they looked like a leader. The recruits followed him instead of the corporal leading the way. They looked at each other quickly and then withdrew their gazes at the same speed. Chapter 7, New Recruit Renault. On the first day, the hellish training that Augustus had imagined did not come as expected. In fact, they arrived at 8 PM local time on the Telesis 2nd. At this time, the huge underground hangar was full of spaceships and warships taking off and landing, and troop transport trucks carrying hundreds of recruits were heading to the ground military camps with increasing slopes. The Goliath armed robots, which were several people tall, were like steel giants. Even if they were far away from the AVV-5 arc tanks, the deafening roar could make the recruits' eardrums weak. Everything was running in an orderly manner amid the noise. Before Augustus found his own troops, the considerate sergeants asked Augustus and his comrades to lick the flight deck that was soiled by their new boots before going to bed. When the recruits finally made the sergeants feel that the flight deck was really cleaner than their shiny leather boots that they had polished countless times, Augustus got a detailed paper list of the platoons of each company in each recruit training camp. The list was specially marked at the end as being randomly sorted by the intelligent adjutant in the Federal Marine Corps Security Data Network, but it was somewhat of a cover-up. However, powerful families or sons of generals did not need to operate in this regard, because their children would never start from private soldiers. Usually, after a noble child has been gilded in the top universities or senior military academies in Tarsinus, he will directly get the rank of second lieutenant. And if the descendants of the Tarsinus founding family want to join the army, they will undoubtedly have to start even higher. Many heirs of Tarsinus's great families will follow the ancient colonial tradition to join the Federal Marine Corps to temper the heir's strong and courageous character. However, in the era of aggressive explorers, that is, the first 50 or even the first 100 years after the colonial Mother ships from Earth landed in Tarsinus, this tradition that the heirs of the nobility must join the army was gradually forgotten. Only those original founding families who always wanted to flaunt their noble bloodline still followed this tradition, but the heirs and the children of the nobility also mostly served in civilian jobs far away from the front line and danger. The most famous of them is the Duke family of Tarsinus. Almost every generation of the Duke family has a general. Augustus realized that the nobles of Korhal were different from the oldest elder families of Tarsinus. They could dominate the world on Korhal IV, while the old nobles of Tarsinus controlled the 13 main star worlds of the Federation, including Korhal, and many more marginal worlds. Augustus Mengsk's private armed forces could not be a match for the Federation Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps, a terrible war machine, would only obey the orders of the federal government and the elder families of Tarsinus that he wanted to resist and overthrow. Slogans and political propaganda alone could not overthrow the corrupt federal government, which might be the reason why Angus failed in the end. However, Augustus, who was worried about his situation, was soon attracted by a name on the list: James Eugene Raynor, 2nd Platoon, 1st Squad, D Company. Same name? Augustus couldn't help but associate this name with the man with many names in the StarCraft game. It is possible It is now 2488, more than a decade before the start of Wings of Liberty. At this time, the protagonist of the game, Jim Raynor, is probably just a young boy. Fortunately, Augustus does not need to think too much. He can immediately distinguish the truth from the false. After receiving his own bedding, other standard daily necessities including sonic toothbrushes and sonic razors, and a titanium alloy short-bladed saber from the quartermaster, Augustus took a military bus to the ground modular military camp. The soldiers' dormitory in the recruit training camp is incredibly spacious, with solid platinum steel alloy plates on the walls and solid wood texture tiles on the floor that have been treated for non-slip treatment. There are 6 camp beds about 7 feet long and 5 feet wide in the wide rectangular dormitory, as well as a separate sonic shower room, toilet and even a holographic projector. This does not match the rumors on the Federal News Network. It is said that the Federal Marine Corps is short of supplies on the front line, and the recruits have to sleep in the stables and cowsheds of local farmers. In the unreport, a veteran claimed in an interview that the accommodation conditions of the Federal Marines were only slightly worse than the luxurious villas in Tarsus. Every recruit was assigned a robot servant, and their lives were regular, just like punching in at work every day. They only needed to complete 2 hours of training every day. Even though he had expected it, Augustus still wondered if his father Angus secretly donated money to the Federal Marines on Tillersis II in exchange for such preferential treatment, but the Federal Marine system probably didn't dare to accept donations from a revolutionary. Augustus was the last to arrive at the dormitory. He first dropped his backpack and went into the shower room to wash and tidy up his appearance before preparing to get to know his comrades who would fight side by side with him in the future. When Augustus walked out of the shower room, the noisy recruit dormitory immediately became quiet. Just when Augustus was quite satisfied with this, an inappropriate voice appeared. "Look, a beautiful playboy. I bet the villains of C Company will fight for his ass." A red-haired recruit who was lying on the bed in a pair of slippers shouted loudly and immediately sat up straight to prepare for a fight. "But no matter what, when they target you, as a recruit sergeant, I will at least fight to protect your asshole." Augustus stared at the red-haired recruit's deep blue eyes. Although he was also a new recruit on the first day of entering the camp, Augustus had already served as the squad leader of this recruit class as a recruit sergeant. This phenomenon is actually not common. Augustus was only informed when he received the class list. Even if he used his toes to think, Augustus could guess that this was undoubtedly due to his brother, who was the commander of the Ground Assault Division. Augustus Mengsk could easily use some means to let the officers of the training camp conduct secret operations. Of course, Augustus himself may not know this. After all, there are many people who are willing to please this talented general with a bright future. The highest ranking officer in the boot camp is only a major, and Augustus is now a colonel. Once the war is over, he will be able to become a general immediately, after accumulating many military merits. Augustus was able to get the position of acting corporal not because he is handsome, but purely because he has a backer. No matter what Augustus thought before, he now thinks it is quite good. Some of the troublemakers among the recruits will naturally be dissatisfied with someone who is inexplicably taller than them, but compared to the power Augustus actually got, this is just a small trouble. "Sergeant Mengsk, don't mind. Hank's way of greeting is different. I believe he is just jealous of your splendid beauty." Before the atmosphere became worse, another recruit with short black hair made a smooth situation. The black-haired recruit had a pair of sharp brown eyes and a high nose. Compared to the fair-skinned Augustus, his skin was darker and drier, but he also had the collagen that young people should have. Augustus only estimated that he should be only 1 or 2 years older than himself. Judging from the faint smell of engine oil on the recruit's body, he should have been an apprentice in a private mechanical repair shop before joining the army. They didn't remember the fleeting glance they had shared in the underground hangar. Many people's earliest impression of this character stayed on the bald-headed macho man driving a vulture car in the StarCraft 1 era, and even then Jim Raynor had already passed middle age. In contrast, the image of the ranger leader with wrinkles on his face and a neatly trimmed beard in StarCraft 2 may be more deeply rooted in people's hearts. Jim Raynor is one of the most impressive and famous racial protagonists in the StarCraft game. His story can be said to be a coherent era from StarCraft I to StarCraft II. Nice to meet you. I'm Jim Raynor, and that idiot is Hannah Kank. Raynor smiled kindly, and then he pointed to the others. This is Tomomo, my elementary school classmate. Several of us are from Shiloh. You may not have heard of it, but I dare say that Shiloh is awesome. And then, this is Connor Ward, Xander Marks, and Amy Brandon thanks to Agent Rangrong, Nanaozi, Lakil, Yimunkianians, and Commandlser for the rewards, and thanks to Umawa Harklam, Mengsk Rabbit, Agent Rangrong, Lakil, and Yimunkianians for the monthly tickets, and thanks. Some names are a little hard to type em. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8 D Company 2nd Platoon 1st Squad. Augustus's squad was a full squad, with a total of 12 people. In wartime, a reorganized Terran Federation Marine Corps full squad will have 3 fire teams of 4 people each, and more elite troops will be equipped with single-person shoulder-mounted rockets and plasma flamethrowers to provide the necessary heavy fire support as a powerful battlefield fulcrum. In the period when there were abundant manpower and medical personnel, the Federation Interstellar Marine Corps Command believed that a standard Federation fire support squad should be equipped with an additional professional medical personnel. However, during the Kalian War, this situation was quite rare. I'm Augustus Mengsk, and my hometown is Korhal IV, a garden like a fairyland in a dream. Augustus stretched out his hand and shook Raynor's somewhat rough hand together. Welcome to my home in Korhal. Unlike Jim Raynor, the commander of the rebels in Augustus' memory, this Raynor was full of the youthful vigor and drive, which was why he couldn't recognize him at first. In the game, Jim Raynor's beard and whiskers are neatly trimmed, his forehead is full of knife-like forehead wrinkles, weathered and wrinkled, and Jim Raynor was the core of the Rangers at that time. Most of the time, Raynor is always positive, but sometimes, dejection and discouragement will occupy his heart. Augustus wrote down the name of everyone in the class and their corresponding appearance and birthplace. 4 of the 11 people are of Ka descent, 2 of whom played cards with Augustus on the Peace Dove transport ship, and the other 2 are his high school classmates. This should of course be attributed to Augustus's good luck. A prominent family background is undoubtedly crucial for a time traveler. There is no need to go against me. The recruit sergeant is not a dormitory manager, and I will not use military regulations and discipline to restrict your freedom. Then Augustus looked at Hannah Kank, who had a troublemaking look before. My name is Augustus Mengsk. I'm only responsible for leading the 2nd platoon and the 1st squad to win in all training subjects during the 12 weeks of boot camp. If necessary, I will lead you to kick the instructor's ass. Everyone looked at Augustus unconsciously and was shocked by his confidence. Obviously, this Mengsk knew exactly what he wanted and what he should do and would put it into practice without hesitation. Then, under the slightly odd gaze of all the recruits, Augustus skillfully took out a few decks of playing cards from his backpack. It's still early. Do you want to play cards? To everyone's surprise, after hearing this, Hannah Kank, who was originally aggressive and wanted to fight at any time, completely forgot what he said and jumped up first. Great. I like playing cards. The card game lasted until nearly 12 o'clock. Hannock, who was penniless and even lost all his clothes, had already lost his 3rd pair of underwear and was holding the last one in his hand tightly. In front of Renault and Augustus were each a pair of lace pants. Young people from various main star worlds and colonies of the Federation sat on beds and chairs playing cards. The dormitory of the 2nd row and 1st class was full of cheers, boos and Hannock's wailing. It was not that Augustus and Renault were so good at playing cards, but simply that Hannock's cards were always stinky, and he was a real unlucky guy. Soon Hannock lost the underwear on hand, so he untied his belt and prepared to take off the one on his body. For the first time, Renault's face showed a look of fear, and Augustus's expression was unprecedentedly solemn. He immediately stood up and tried to stop the redhead recruit who was taking off his pants. At this moment, the seemingly indestructible platinum steel wall behind him suddenly burst open, and a group of human soldiers wearing dark black armor and holding electromagnetic rifles rushed in, raising their guns and aiming at the confused recruits. Hanak lifted his underwear in horror. Even so, half of his buttocks were still exposed. "What are you looking at, you perverts?" Compared to Hanak, the reactions of the others were more normal. Most of them were so scared that they sat down or stood still, like frozen hairtails. Others instinctively lay on the ground to find shelter. Although he was really shocked, Augustus still sat there with an unchanged expression. At the first moment, Augustus recognized the guild emblem on these black armored soldiers, Tovey Industries, a dark green ring with a hexagram symbol engraved in the center. This is the Kel-morian Ripper Force, composed of the strongest and bravest warriors in the Union. Its position on the battlefield is equivalent to the most ordinary Marines in the Federal Marines, and it is the most solid cornerstone of each Union group army. It is simply a fantasy that they can appear in the boot camp at this time. As far as Augustus knows, the Turris' main base where he is located is one of the most solid military fortresses in the Terran Federation and has the largest known underground airport on the planet. In addition to the recruits and the engineering corps, there are 2 main battalions and a Goliath armed robot company stationed inside the fortress. Tens of thousands of engineers, mechanics and other logistics personnel maintain the operation of this huge fortress. If Kel-morian wants to capture this fortress, he must mobilize at least the main force of the division and a large number of artillery regiments, armored brigades and air force units to cooperate in the attack, and this scale of troop mobilization cannot be silent. Even if Kel-morian's commander uses mysterious means to let his troops avoid orbital detectors, thermal imaging sensors, ground vibration sensors, scouts, and outposts, when the real fight comes, they will fight against the main federal forces outside the fortress, not the recruit training camp in the center. The most obvious loophole is the way they appear. It is absolutely impossible to smash the presteel wall by relying on a single electromagnetic gun. Not to mention that the opposite side of the wall is actually the second-class dormitory next to them, and when Augustus looked out from the crack in the wall, he only saw a bright red desert. This is a holographic projection, guys. Almost at the same time, when the Kel-morian Ripper appeared, Augustus calmly said to the panicked recruits, "The highly realistic holographic projection is an expensive luxury for the civilian class, but it is just a common part of the Mengsk family's daily life." Augustus' intuition told him that when something is too absurd to be contrary to reality, he should construct the truth himself through the known clues. "Sit down, let's continue playing cards." These 2 sentences immediately calmed the recruits in the class. At this time, most people have not been able to react, but at this moment they have the illusion that Augustus will definitely not be wrong. As soon as the voice fell, the muzzle of the Union standard electromagnetic rifle in the hands of the Kel-morian soldier suddenly emerged with an ice blue flame. Augustus seemed to be able to feel the bullet piercing his chest, but this was obviously not real. The recruit Tomomo was so scared that he sat on the ground. Hanak turned his head to look at him, as if he was trying to see if he was scared to pee his pants. After that, these Kel-morian soldiers did not continue to shoot, but suddenly turned into black data points and condensed into a uniformed sergeant. The sergeant's face may have been deliberately synthesized by artificial intelligence. It was ordinary and featureless. "I'm Mechanical Sergeant Tavis. From today on, I will help you with training. Remember, the enemy will appear in front of you at any time and any place. Even in the rear base, you must always be vigilant." The holographic projection portrait said, "Don't let me catch you, you piece of shit." Hanak looked at him and made a contemptuous gesture without disguising it. Then he himself felt unsatisfied and gave middle finger again, a cultural heritage passed down from the Earth era to the present. "Rookie Hanak Hank, your name has been recorded by the Central Security Bureau. This is the first warning. You should show due respect to your superiors." The holographic projection face, which was expressionless in every sense, spoke. "Be careful, Renault. They must have installed these advanced projectors in every corner." While Hanak cursed under his breath, Augustus looked at Jim Raynor who was sitting next to him. "This must have cost a lot of taxpayers' money. I'm sure my farm also got a share of the money." Renault laughed. Chapter 9, Rookie Sergeant. Afterwards, the first squad of the 2nd platoon of D Company was still playing cards. After Hanek lost all his shirts, trousers, belts, crash car models and various styles of underwear, and was ready to gamble his next month's salary to continue playing cards, Augustus timely asked all the new recruits in the class to go to bed. It was already 2 o'clock in the morning, and except for Hanek who had no sleep, the new recruits went to bed obediently. Augustus ignored Hanek and forced him to sleep and rested as usual. Because he was the last one to arrive at the dormitory, Augustus had no bed to choose from, and the only one left for him was the lower bunk closest to the door. I want to remind you, Hanek, the wake-up call will sound at 6 o'clock on time. Before lying down and closing his eyes to sleep, Augustus said to Hanek, who was still sitting on the stool with his back to him, looking thoughtful. Augustus' unusual calm performance and calm temperament today undoubtedly left a deep impression on Hanek. On the marginal agricultural planet Sherlock, Hanek was used to seeing migrant workers, homeless rogues and hooligans, but he had never met anyone like him. Therefore, although the red-haired boy still felt resistant to Augustus' orders, he would listen to them, and at least think about whether he should listen to Augustus. After thinking that not sleeping would not benefit him at all, Hanek returned to his bed with a curse. Shit. The wake-up call sounded on time, and the mechanical Sergeant Tavis, who was synthesized by holographic images, kicked open every dormitory door on time. At this time, the recruits of the 1st squad of the 2nd platoon of D Company began to regret last night's revelry. The first subject for the recruits of the Terran Federation is ideological education. Augustus and his squad must arrive at the central square of the main base of Tylosis, which is shaped like a millstone, at 6:30. About 7,000 recruits formed a tight formation in the central square. Major Mybaka, the commander of the recruit training camp, gave a speech to all the recruits, instilling the values of Terran Federation soldiers and the central idea of maintaining the Federation's rule in this star zone. Major Mybaka finally emphasized the discipline and regulations of the Federation Marine Corps, and required everyone to recite them by heart. Augustus also learned that the elimination rate of recruits in the main base of Tylosis has been maintained below 5%, but no one knows where the eliminated recruits eventually went. Major Mybaka's 1-hour pre-training speech was extremely long. Except for Augustus, almost no one was interested in the Major's speech. The recruits of the 2nd platoon and the 1st squad, including Jim Raynor, were drowsy. During this period, Augustus firmly memorized every military regulation and discipline, and seriously thought about which of them must be followed and which ones can be ignored, and which one has loopholes to exploit. After the speech, Augustus's D Company regrouped, and, under the leadership of a sergeant platoon leader, went to a cross-country training ground in the base for standard physical training. The training included basic Q posture, 8-minute 2-kilometer running, and multiple sets of pull-ups and other bent body stretching. Augustus was then told that more systematic firearms and CMC power armor training would not begin until the 3rd week. In the afternoon, Virtual Sergeant Tavis announced that the recruit training originally scheduled for 12 weeks would be shortened to 9 weeks, and the recruits would be able to touch guns by the next week at the latest. This means that the war on Tylosis II has further escalated, and the front line urgently needs to replenish troops. Augustus is more worried that the shortened training time will lead to a decline in the combat capability of the soldiers, but since the combat command is not worried, he has no choice. In the training camp, only the platoon and company level officers are formal officers, and the squad leaders are all recruits. Maybe the combat department wants to train some reserve officers in advance, but it is more likely that there are not enough qualified and competent officers. As a new soldier, Augustus needed to implement the orders of his superior officers and strictly manage his soldiers to ensure that they would not fall behind in training. What satisfied Augustus was that the recruits in the first class were all excellent. At least their physical strength was not a problem. The soldiers from Shiloh were basically farmers, high school graduates and truck drivers, and the recruits from Antigua, Bratis and Telada also had strong bodies. Only Benjamin Crandall from the self-cultivating planet Helsin had been a monk in the local church before, but in fact he was tall and mighty, the tallest of all, at 6 feet 5 inches tall. In Hanek's words, he looked quite capable of fighting. The two high school classmates from Augustus' hometown of Kurt Josephine and Alan Lundstein were really a bit of a drag. Augustus went to the best aristocratic schools, instilling from childhood to adulthood, and his classmates were of course all pampered aristocratic descendants. Even though not all things had to be done by servants, their physical fitness was much worse than that of others who had been crawling in the mud and streets since childhood. In fact, Augustus had very limited friendship with them. In the past, he was always surrounded by a group of villains and frivolous idlers, while Josephine and Lundstein were a different group from him. But no matter what, this special relationship on the battlefield would undoubtedly make them feel close to Augustus. Whenever Augustus issued training orders or had any new proposals, these new recruits of Korhal would always respond to him at the first time. This was crucial for Augustus to establish prestige in his class, making his future plan to form his own team possible. At present, there are two main groups in the small second row and first squad, one led by Augustus's Korhal people, and the other part is the Sherlock people led by Jim Raynor. Augustus believes that this part of the gap will soon disappear, and he will establish the initial trust with the soldiers in his class in the boot camp. Once they set foot on the battlefield friendship of life and death will eventually make them closely connected. Throughout the whole day, the mechanical sergeant Tavis will appear in front of the recruits at any time, and in any way, to correct their standing and training postures. There are also many people who are covered in dust and their legs are weak, because of the sudden appearance and crushing of the Kel-morian tanks or the bullets and rockets flying from unknown directions, but it won't take long for the recruits to become numb to it. After all, these things can't be real. Another major training subject for the recruits is to fight against the Kel-morian troops that may appear at any time. During this period of time in the boot camp, they must overcome their fear of the battlefield and the enemy. Among these Kel-morian troops that suddenly appear, there are both fully armed Rippers and Kel-morian labor auxiliary troops who are completely unprotected, wearing only khaki work clothes, wearing steel helmets, carrying electromagnetic rifles and ammunition bags. If the Kel-morians have any ability that is famous in the universe, it is to remove some parts from seemingly broken objects or machines and piece them together into something that can barely be used. Augustus was told that some notorious Kel-morian special forces should be paid special attention to, such as the Moria Sentinels, the Kellanus Spirit Guards, the Three-Headed Snake, the Sea Dragon, the Assault Troopers, the Guild Guards, and the Brutus Brotherhood. The holographic projection simulation army that can cover a quarter of the entire base has actually appeared. What Augustus and his new recruits have to do during this period is to familiarize themselves with the combat mode of the Kel-morian regular army, and at the same time, remember the badges and combat habits of all the well-known combat units of Kel-morian. For example, the combat style of the Three-Headed Snake is just like a group of hyenas pouncing on their prey. They often appear in deserts and desertified grasslands without cover, riding assault reconnaissance vehicles to hunt the isolated and helpless Terran Federation army. The logo is a dark green three-headed snake pattern with the upper body erected in a deterrent posture. Guild guards are composed of the most heroic warriors from the various guilds in Kel-morian. They are widely known for their absolute loyalty to the guild and their unique practice of still following the tradition of using cold weapons and revolvers as their main combat weapons. Some military experts in the Terran Federation believe that the spiritual symbolism of guild guards is far greater than its practical significance. Usually, they only appear as a guard of honor during the ancestor worship ceremony in Moria. The emblem is a sword and shield pattern with a pure white background and amber outlines. Thanks to Fuheo, et, the Hymn of the Night Sky, the Morning Night, King Zzi, the High-Level Templar Karis, the Agent Rangrong, and the monthly ticket of Yemen Kyanian S. Thanks to Meng Meng Dagugugu, et, the Holy Sigh of the Night Sky, Uncleaker, King Zzi, the High-Level Templar Karis, the Agent Rangrong, Lakaxia, and Nanaozi for their awards. Chapter 10 Week 1. The first week of boot camp was all about physical fitness and drills, interspersed with a small amount of individual weapons training, including the use of battlefield compasses, multispectral night vision goggles, portable personal information processors, field medical kits, and three-dimensional map imaging devices. From the wake-up call at 6 AM to returning to the dormitory at 9:30 PM, the training camp schedule was so full that Augustus could not find time to rest. After the training every day, even these energetic young people were exhausted. After the first day, it was difficult for them to muster up the energy to play cards or brag all night. Having said that, Augustus still took advantage of the last night of the first training week. Although the time available to recruits in boot camp would never exceed 3 hours, Augustus still found an opportunity to take his squad to the barracks for dinner. According to Augustus, among the several platoons in Company D, he was the only one who insisted on doing this, insisting on building a solid and reliable friendship with each of his subordinates, remembering everyone's personality and specialties, and even the inconspicuous personal habits. The Marine Corps infantry regulations prohibit soldiers from drinking alcohol during any service time except for leave, so the military bar in the base is prohibited from selling alcoholic beverages. Despite this, Augustus still got 20 bottles of No. 8 whiskey and other alcoholic beverages produced in recent years from the bartender at the price of 150 credit coins per bottle. This is at least 5 times the market price. Jim Raynor was surprised at Augustus's generosity. In Sherlock, it is equivalent to 3 days' salary for an ordinary agricultural robot repairman or a skilled worker working in a refined gas plant. Augustus's conversation, behavior and concept of money all point to the same point. He must be a descendant of a noble in Korhal, and he must be a wealthy noble who controls at least one pillar industry, or is in politics. Raynor and the others in the class did not ask questions, and Augustus made it clear that he did not want to mention his family. So, the topic was immediately stopped and no one mentioned it again. If the recruits in Augustus' class really looked up the status of the surname Mengsk in Korhal, they would have more or less understood how prominent their squad leader's family background was, but they didn't really care. No one here cared how rich you were, or how noble your family was. On the battlefield, even a billionaire's head would be smashed with a rifle butt. If they could all live to the day of honorable discharge, they might have the opportunity to find a stable job in Augustus' family business to support their family, and that would be all there was to life. In the Terran Federation, where the economy was in recession, order was in turmoil, and people's lives were becoming increasingly precarious, expecting more would only make people feel deeply painful. While others were munching on French fries, fried steaks, and golden and fragrant stewed potatoes in the bar, every recruit in the first class was sighing how good it felt to have a rich person in the class, and at the same time mercilessly criticizing the daily meals of the Marines. The food rations of the Federal Marine Corps have always been called fast-eating shit. They must provide soldiers with the fastest absorbed protein and sugar in the shortest time, and the taste and appearance are not taken into consideration at all. In the main base of Ulysses, Augustus ate the most liquid food similar to mashed potatoes and sweet sticks. Usually, if you need to add meals, you have to buy them at your own expense, but the supplies in the base are quite scarce, and only officers can afford fresh vegetables and meat. However, Major McKeeby believes that there is no need to improve the food standards in the boot camp, because the Federal UF series of individual rations contain all the nutrients needed by soldiers, and eating these individual rations is even healthier and more nutritious than their daily diet. In this regard, the recruit Hannock gave a sharp evaluation. The major must have never eaten shit. Due to the existence of the ban, everyone remained restrained when drinking. Only Pastor Benjamin had never drunk alcohol and did not want to try it. Most people tried No. 8 whiskey for the first time, including Augustus and Raynor. This is a distilled liquor with a concentration of more than 40 degrees. In the fringe world, whiskey imported from the core planet through interstellar ships can even be considered a high-end liquor. Augustus could not bribe Tavis, the virtual mechanical sergeant who managed the dormitory access, so they still had to return to the dormitory before 10:30. The atmosphere at the party table was once very lively. The recruits drank whiskey, beer, and cocktails while cursing the rations and the training camp commander, until a recruit named Connor Ward got drunk and suddenly started sobbing. Connor Ward was an outlier in the second row and first squad. He had short light blonde hair, light blue eyes, dark and healthy chocolate skin, and a tall and strong figure. Although he was only 23 years old, his melancholy eyes and the sad expression he often showed made him look much older than young people like Augustus. Ward never smiled, and he didn't even talk much. This kind of character is obviously not old. Augustus once noticed him silently looking at his family photo. It was a river with blue and lush green Connor was hugging a beautiful woman, and 3 blunt children stood at his feet. His smile was bright and sunny, as if he was another person, a happy husband and father. When Ward cried and told everyone how his wife and lovely children were killed by the Kel-morians, the sadness and pain revealed in the photo became deeper. A Kel-morian assault company attacked the defenseless Rikdorf on the planet of Telida 3 in the second year of the Guild War. This should have been just an operation aimed at destroying local military facilities, but the mining areas, gas refineries and even underground transportation pipeline nodes where a large number of civilians and workers lived and worked were attacked. Ward worked in one of the gas refineries. His wife warned him before the attack that he should flee their house and hide in the open ground, but he believed that the Kel-morians would never penetrate into the core world of the Federation. Moria is far from the Telida system, and before the disaster, all men and women were saying, "We are still a long way from war." The Kel-morians were merciless. They used incendiary bombs and laser weapons, turning all the factories into bright pillars of fire, hundreds of feet high, and dust columns made of dust, glass, and people rose up. The earth-penetrating missiles penetrated the mines, and hundreds of workers were killed by shock, scalded by the hot air, and buried by the collapsed pits. At that time, the entire gas refinery was burning, and the fire engulfed the residential area where the workers' families lived, including Ward's wife and 2 young children. Ward only had time to save his youngest daughter. His little girl did not survive. Kel-morians swooped down and fired at the unarmed civilians. The laser beam hit Ward's 2-year-old daughter, and he watched her turn into pieces. Ward's alcohol tolerance was a problem. He could not hold his liquor and got drunk easily. Perhaps he had been suppressed for too long and needed to vent, so he cried for a long time until Augustus and Raynor carried him back. After that, Augustus decided not to let Connor drink unless necessary and to observe and record his suicidal tendencies. On the battlefield, this would probably kill all of them. Chapter 11 CMC Power Armor. In the 3rd week, Augustus' class began to learn how to operate and use CMC 200 power armor. To be honest, they were extremely disappointed with their first attempt. The power armor used for training was all old models eliminated from the battlefield. The surface of the armor was covered with scratches and marks left by shrapnel. Some parts of the armor were seriously damaged, and the internal servos and pads were covered with a layer of frost-like ash. The damage to the armor was so common that the recruits could understand the fact that some armor was missing some parts. These tattered power armors were very different from the bright and beautiful steel armor on the recruitment posters. They seemed to be antiques from centuries ago. After Augustus got the power armor, he had to clean the oil and ash inside and use perfume to cover up the foot odor and sweat odor left by the previous user. If this was disgusting enough, someone also found hard vomit and other indescribable objects in his helmet. The power armor of the Federal Marine Corps is maintained by a special armor technician. Usually each platoon is equipped with an armor technician and 2 assistants. The main force and special tactics squad will be equipped with more professional technicians, but there is only 1 technician class in the entire boot camp. The maintenance of armor and weapons is a compulsory subject for recruits, even if all they can actually do is polish and oil the armor. The first thing Augustus learned was that he had to build a good relationship with the armor technicians and the team. On the battlefield, power armor is the only guarantee of the life of the Marines, and no one wants it to have problems. If there is only 1 technician in his unit and there are conflicts between them, then no one will know whether the life support system of his power armor will suddenly fail. Or more simply, there is an electromagnetic grenade in the battery unit of the power armor. Compared with the latest experimental special purpose armor such as the 230, 230FX series and 250E, as well as the CMC 300 that will be mass produced by the Marine Corps in the future, the stability of the cold fusion filter used by the CMC 200 to power the servo system is very problematic, and the failure rate fluctuates around an astonishing 0.9%. For the unfortunate man trapped in this iron prison due to a power failure on the battlefield, such a failure rate is a nightmare that will happen 100%. This power armor still has many defects of the old era, such as the gaps between its armor plates, which are fatal defects. The joints between the 2 armor plates at the knee lack strong protection, and the several inch thick cables of the servo system and the Marines' environmental combat uniforms cannot resist bullets accelerated to supersonic speeds. As long as the angle is right, broken shrapnel and bullets deflected by the armor may penetrate the seam from above and cut the Marines' legs in half. At the same time, the cooling tower on the back of the CMC-200 for heat dissipation still uses mid-century technology, which makes its working efficiency far different from the latest products of Tarsinus Bruback Military Industry Corporation. Putting aside these defects, the power armor is still an epoch-making weapon of war. Its solid armor can ignore all small arms firepower. Rifles and shotguns of all calibers in the Earth era can only leave scratches on the armor. They can also resist chemical and biological weapons and nuclear radiation. People have to deal with these tin cans like tanks and heavy armored vehicles, using anti-tank guns and heavy weapons to smash the relatively fragile helmets of Marines and blow up the Marine skulls. In the territory of the Terran Federation, local armed groups in marginal areas usually still use weapons used by their grandfathers' for hunting, and even the most powerful automatic rifles are not enough to penetrate the armor of Marines. In the logs of local security officers, a company of Federation Marines can easily defeat a large-scale rebel army, and it is a one-sided massacre. It will be the next century before Marines become the most common combat force and the Cope Star Zone and power armor technology flows into the hands of private armed forces or mercenaries and pirates. In 2488, such a technological barrier is enough for the Terran Federation to suppress the Kel-morian army that lacks power armor and gain an advantage in the war. Before contacting these power armors, the training camp sergeant will give each recruit a power armor training manual. The compiler of the training manual is an army general. The admiral kindly told the recruits at the beginning that operating the CMC series power armor is not much more difficult than using their father's exoskeleton harvesting robot. However, every recruit seemed to have returned to infancy and lost the ability to walk when they first put on these iron plates. Beginners with uncoordinated hands and feet could not even crawl on the ground, and even the best recruits could only stagger a few steps. Of course, it won't take long for the recruits to adapt to this change. The CMC power armor has a complete set of built-in skeletons like spines, which can bear the burden of the armor itself for the Marines, so that they will not be crushed by their own gravity. The use of ceramic composite armor makes the weight of the power armor itself lighter. Even the heaviest medieval full-body plate armor on Earth will not be heavier than these power armors powered by fusion energy. The tactile feedback system inside the power armor ensures that the Marines can operate flexibly. It can accurately transmit the Marines' movements and other operations to the entire power armor through the servo system, embedded under each piece of armor, and connected by cables, so that the Marines will not cause dislocation or sprain of human tissue due to the incoordination between the various parts of the power armor and the human body. Marines must go through continuous training to make the power armor truly become a part of their body, so that the hundreds of pounds of armor are as easy to use as skin. This is not an easy task for federal recruits who have just come into contact with these new toys, but fortunately they still have a full 8 weeks to learn how to operate the power armor skillfully. According to experience and data, even the dumbest recruits can make the armor a part of their body within 2 weeks. The training manual and the virtual sergeant in charge of recruit training all emphasize the same point. If you can't make the power armor your external organ, your third and fourth hands and feet in a short period of time, then it will become your grave. Augustus had never touched a harvester robot. His only impression of the Terran Marines' power armor in the Korhal sector came from Titus in the StarCraft Second Wings of Liberty CG. Like all other recruits, Augustus acted like a drunk duck when he first put on the power armor. Although Augustus did not believe that the veterans were born to operate the power armor, they were still scolded by the instructors who supervised them. My 80-year-old grandmother can dance ballet in this. In the eyes of the instructors, the ugly performance of the recruits was as incredible as a newborn fish that could not swim. In the face of their roars, any complaint would be regarded as a provocation to the superiors, and the only words the recruits could say were yes, sir. If the yes, sir is not shouted loudly enough, or the pronunciation is not strong and full enough, then the instructor will immediately question whether they are not energetic enough. Why can't I hear the voices of you maggots? At this time, Augustus and his comrades can only answer in unison over and over again, "We love the Marine Corps. Being a soldier is the most glorious. We are weapons of war. We pray for death. We long for war." In the next 3 weeks, the first thing the recruits do when they get up every day is to quickly tidy up their housework, and then they will board the military transport truck with their personal information cards with their personal numbers. Then the military transport truck will send the recruits to the power armor assembly platform in the barracks, and the modularly programmed robotic arms will assemble the armor piece by piece. The training will last all day until the recruits are too tired to move, or Colonel Maybe Cam makes a surprise inspection of the Marine Corps ideological teaching results, and they can get a short break. Thanks to Ed, the first deacon of this book, for the reward from the night skies him. Thanks to Dreams Chenfeng, and I who always likes Loki for the reward, and thanks to Ed, the hymn of the night sky, Zeristat, the glory of air, Os, Zajuan Leo, faith cannot change belief, and Kim Guanshan for the monthly ticket. Thank you for your support. Chapter 12 Week 5. Augustus boarded the T-338 assembly platform of the 24th barracks of the training camp. Surrounded by 4 concave curved walls and a bronze valve, mechanical arms surrounded him and assembled the power armor parts in an orderly manner. The whole process took less than 24 seconds, just like a factory assembly line producing canned food. When the Marines need to take off the power armor to rest, the disassembly process is the opposite. In battles and protracted wars far away from the base and barracks, the Marines cannot remove the armor by themselves, and the time spent with the science skin may last 4 months. There is a specially designed internal circulation system in the armor, so that the wearer does not have to worry about going to the toilet. However, the designers are indifferent to another vital physiological need of the Marines, that is, scratching. Augustus seemed to be able to feel the infinite energy contained in the fusion reactor located in the chest of the armor. This controllable, small-scale nuclear fusion technology was still a product of science fiction novels and movies in his time. He only needs to raise his hand slightly, and the servo system will respond immediately. It takes almost no effort to lift a Gauss rifle with one hand. When the wearer runs, he will not feel tired, even if he runs 20 kilometers. At the beginning, in the CMC 100 and even the earlier Unit 01 period, the mechanics would use a crane to stuff the test trainees into the armor weighing hundreds of pounds. At that time, the power armor was more like a Gundam that used gas fuel thrusters on the back to achieve high-speed maneuvers. After the initial implementation of this technology, it encountered many insurmountable technical bottlenecks, and more than 20 drivers died during the period. Both the basic theory and the experimental level were stuck in bottlenecks, so scientists and engineers pessimistically estimated that humans would not be able to produce safe and reliable power armor within 200 years. Until the epoch-making servo system and the black technology like small cold fusion reactor were publicly introduced, the power armor of the Kel-morian people was still in the period of poor imitation. All the available Kel-morian power armor came from battlefield spoils and an unknown number of smuggled goods. There were rumors that some of the creation families in Tarsinus were secretly selling the military supplies they transferred from the gray area to the Kel-morians at a high price, and then these false and treasonous rumors quickly disappeared. The transport platform then sent Augustus to the transfer platform on the lower level of the barracks. While the platform was moving, 2 other mechanical arms hung a shiny E9 electromagnetic rifle and 2 high-explosive pulse grenades on his back and waist respectively. The transfer platform was full of nearly 200 new recruits from D Company. They had been repaired and painted by themselves, and the repainted power armor was much more shiny than when they first received it. Augustus followed the blue steel torrent to a telescopic step downward on the transfer platform. The 4 flag bearers in the front carried a brand new federal red and blue flag. Each Marine in front of him had his own number on the back of his helmet, usually the first letter of the battalion, company, platoon, and squad plus the personal ID number in the database. At the end of the stairs, there was a heavy airlock door that slowly opened with the roar of high-pressure gas. The light outside was dazzling, as if it came from heaven. Many Marines could feel a strong sense of mission and honor when they walked out of the barracks. Just as the Marine Corps recruiting propaganda department said, they were really invincible. Augustus believed that they lacked some awareness of being cannon fodder. The barracks were built in the superstructure area of the main base of SYNOPSIS, located above the ground. Therefore, when Augustus walked out of the barracks, he saw the pure blue sky of the planet, a warm golden sun shining on the earth, and a faint smell of rust in the wind. A few dozen yards away from Augustus, 2 Goliath armed robots walked step by step towards a heavy transport plane that was landing. The hum of Goliath's servo motor and the roar of the spacecraft engine were transmitted to his ears through the sound collection device on his mask. Augustus opened the HUD display panel on the mask and called up the built-in computer interface. At this time, the temperature and humidity inside the base were displayed in the lower right corner. The time was 7 AM on May 4th, 2488. He could use the built-in computer to turn on other functions of the power armor, such as the infrared night vision device on the mask, thermal imaging and auxiliary aiming. Augustus could also use the control panel to enable the stimulant unit, and the stimulant syringe would complete the injection in an instant under the action of pressure. Military stimulants are a mixture of synthetic adrenaline, endorphins and a mental strengthening drug. Soldiers injected with the drug will greatly improve their speed and reaction ability, eliminate fatigue, and restore the user to the best state in a very short time. The side effects of this stimulant are also quite amazing. Because its raw materials are highly addictive, Marines are also prone to drug dependence. The duration of stimulants can reach 3 to 6 hours. The side effects of long-term use will include, but are not limited to insomnia, weight loss, mania/mild mania, convulsions, paranoia, hallucinations, internal bleeding, and brain necrosis. The military regulations clearly limit the use of stimulants, no more than 5 times in the same period of combat. Marines often fall into great pain after 5 consecutive injections of stimulants. However, no one will worry about such problems in war. Whether it is an ordinary Federal Marine or a battle-hardened general, they all hold the view that the more you fight, the longer you live. These operations on the face display are completed by both hands in the armor. The sliding and tapping of fingers can be transmitted to the display page through the tactile feedback system, just like remote control. The back of the CMC-200 power armor also has a set of built-in water tanks that can store 2 to 4 gallons of pure water. When Augustus needs to replenish water, he can operate the control panel on the headset to drink water through a hose extending from the back of the armor. This is designed for the combat needs of Marines in extremely harsh areas. In hot lava worlds such as Char and Redstone, liquid water exposed to the outside world will evaporate in a few seconds and escape into the thin atmosphere. This water is independent of the liquid cooling device and the life cycle system. Although the chief designer believes that this is unnecessary, the market researchers believe that this can make the Marines believe that the water they drink does not come from urine and bile. Assemble, line up. Augustus heard the voice of the commander of the D Company of the recruit training camp in the communication channel inside the helmet. He stood still and all the recruits in the first squad of the 2nd platoon gathered towards him at this time. In just a few seconds, the originally chaotic team of recruits condensed into a regular queue. Goose step. I say, boss, the game is already open. How many points do you think Jim can get in the shooting subject today? Hanek suddenly said in the communication channel of the first squad. 3 points, no more. A bottle of 78 port wine, produced by the summer estate of Carson Diego. Augustus replied. Jim Raynor's performance, when he first came into contact with shooting, made it difficult for people to associate him with the future Ranger Commander. It is not an exaggeration to describe him as terrible. Without wearing power armor, he could shoot off target even at a distance of 10 yards. According to Hanek, he can shoot better than Raynor with his eyes closed. Today will definitely be better than yesterday, my father always says. Raynor hasn't finished speaking yet, and the channel burst into laughter, full of joy. He always used the excuse that he had never touched a Gauss gun, but today no one could bear to laugh until he finished. Sooner or later, you will all look at my godlike shooting skills with new eyes. Chapter 13 Graduation and Letter. T-54 shooting range at the SYNOPSIS main base, 8:35 AM on June 5th. About 400 yards in front of the 12 recruits of the 1st squad of the 2nd platoon of D Company, a team of Kel-morian Rippers was running. This was obviously their virtual projection, extremely real. Starting with Augustus on the far left, the fully armed Marines raised their Gauss rifles and began to aim. Since it is now a period of comprehensive upgrading of new weapons, the firearms in their hands include old D7, E9 rifles and C14 rifles. Despite this, these firearms all use Gauss technology, which uses electromagnetic induction coils to accelerate magnetic projectiles to supersonic speeds to achieve long-range precision shooting. In addition to the well-known 8mm solid steel nails, the Gauss series rifles can also use hollow point bullets, depleted uranium bullets and incendiary bullets of the same caliber. Unlike the fixed caliber gunpowder guns of the Earth era, the Gauss rifle can cut a person without armor protection in half with just one shot. New Marines can fire 20 to 30 rounds per second, or 1,000 rounds per minute. The ammunition is stored in the shoulders of the power armor, so they can quickly replace and restock the ammunition by holding the Gauss rifle on their shoulders. This allows them to not worry too much about the hit rate when they are in fortresses and bunkers with sufficient ammunition, and when facing most enemies of the Terran Federation, only one shot is enough to kill. But the Marines' bullets are not unlimited. Only madmen and war maniacs can remain absolutely calm on the battlefield. Even after 9 to 12 weeks of recruit training, soldiers will panic and shoot in advance after entering the battlefield, so that they will use up their bullets before the real enemy appears in the effective shooting range. The capacitor system added to the new C14 effectively avoids this problem, although its controllable burst mode has been criticized by the real tough guys and tough guys of the Federation Marines, claiming that any shooting that cannot empty the magazine within 10 seconds is shooting with a slingshot. The shooting of the first squad was over in half a minute. During this time, the bullets they fired were enough to wipe out a squad of Kel-morian Labor Auxiliary Army. The holographic projection showed that all the Kel-morian Rippers fell before the shooting stopped. Well done, Jim. Your progress is so fast. The Tarsinus Borns and Marks praised. You really can't make me happy. Jim Raynor seemed to be uninterested in this. Only when he was shooting in groups would his extremely low hit rate be covered up, although his shooting skills were indeed much better. In fact, Raynor thought that the hit rate was not important at all. Maintaining absolute fire suppression was the top priority. When the commander gave the order, all they had to do was to shoot desperately in the indicated direction. Line up. The commander of D Company said in the company's communication channel. Is that all? I haven't shot enough. The complaints of the recruits came from the first squad's channel one after another. It's time to call it a day. I'm so hungry that I can eat a shell buffalo. Hank Hank was always an exception. He lacked passion for everything except fighting and playing cards. He only wanted to eat. I've received a notice. Brothers, we can prepare for the graduation ceremony. Augustus said in the communication channel at the right time. The next is free time. Go take a cold shower and start rehearsing the formation for the graduation parade at 1 PM. Woohoo. With Hanik's cheer, the first squad was disbanded on the spot. As if it was a signal, the strict formations of the other 4 squads in the second row disappeared without a trace. Faced with a group of recruits who were about to graduate, their platoon leader was helpless. Renault and Augustus walked side by side and headed towards the dormitory. These days in the boot camp made them good friends. Augustus did not have the arrogance commonly seen in nobles, but he was undoubtedly a core figure wherever he went. In the past, Renault always doubted the aristocracy, about which he knew little, and believed that the blood of ancient heroes would not have much effect on those vampires. However, Augustus gradually convinced him that at least not all aristocrats were the federal parasites his father had said. Augustus had a sense of justice that Renault admired. When he just wanted to leave the small place of Sherlock and see the real world, Augustus gave up his comfortable life and joined the army to save the federal people from dire straits. If it weren't for this, Renault couldn't imagine why a noble would step onto the battlefield of blood and fire. In addition to idealists and patriots, what kind of people would join the Federal Marines at this time for a lofty goal? The young Jim Raynor joined the army with a sense of justice and mission to protect and save. He was not experienced enough in dealing with things, and he could not imagine that in addition to patriots who volunteered to defend their country and young people who wanted to make achievements, there were also young people like Augustus who joined the army purely because of their yearning for war and adventure. The original Augustus was just a simple war maniac and crazy adventurer. Augustus himself did not express his views on politics and war. He was quite cautious in this regard. The so-called sense of justice was completely filled in by Raynor himself. Augustus never thought that he was a noble person. At most, he could be regarded as upright. So far, Augustus just wants to survive in the army. Of course, it would be best if he could get a position with his own ability. Augustus will fight for his superiors in the Terran Federation until he retires safely. Making friends with Raynor is not to take advantage of the so-called protagonist halo and hug thighs. In fact, in the end, few people around this guy have a good end. In a sense, being Raynor's good brother is also a very dangerous job. But since they are all in the same class, Augustus himself is also his superior, and they may have to fight together in the future. Try to avoid rifts between comrades, and enhance the cohesion of this small group. On the battlefield, this can at least make them live longer. Now that the signal shielding of the base has been lifted, we can send emails to our families. Augustus said as he walked, and at this time his attention was on the personal terminal in his hand. Intergalactic information communication must be translated by the Star Information Transfer Station. The signal is enhanced, and then sent again at warp speed, to maintain the integrity and timeliness of the information. If I don't pay more, my parents will normally have to wait a few weeks before they can see my message. The young Raynor was cursing. Yes, time is money. Augustus checked the letters he had already edited on his personal terminal. There were a total of 10 letters, and the recipients were Catherine Mengsk and Dorothy Mengsk. Most of these letters were sent to his sister Dorothy, but there was little mention of what Augustus saw and heard in the boot camp. Instead, he spent more time describing the starry sky above the camp and the scenery of Telesis, which was completely different from Korhal, but still very beautiful. As for the letters to his mother, Augustus's words were much more serious, reporting good news but not bad news. Because he knew that his father Angus would definitely read the letter. Even though he was not among the recipients, even though he was too busy to spare even a minute. I heard that there is a cross-galaxy holographic projection device in the base, and you may be able to use it to directly video call your family. Renault added, if you don't care about money. Oh, I know. Augustus shrugged, but I think the holographic projection signal is very unstable and the delay is also terrible. Then Augustus sent out all the emails. The email is an instant messaging service, which means that the letter can be delivered on the same day, even if it is several light years away. Renault saw a series of shocking bill numbers pop up on Augustus' personal terminal screen, and he didn't continue to think about whether this could buy a good farm in Sherlock. Thanks to Aird, Night Sky, and Lotus Root Stew Dragon's chant for the reward. Thanks to Aird, Night Sky's chant, Zeristat, Air's Glory, Beyond the Sea and Mountains, and Os for the monthly tickets. Thank you for your support. Chapter 14 Holidays. The review ceremony that afternoon was flawless. Major Mybaker of the recruit training camp and Lieutenant General Anderson, whose troops were resting at the main base of Telesis, attended the review ceremony. Augustus and his class graduated on schedule, and the officers of the training camp and the virtual Sergeant Tavis gave them high praise. All the recruits in the training camp got the vacation they wanted. Before being assigned to the frontline troops, they had 2 days of rest. From then on, Augustus would only have the opportunity to apply for such a long vacation when the troops were replaced. The curfew was lifted after 6 o'clock in the evening. Almost all the recruits were rushing to the Alpha gate closest to them, while Augustus's class followed him to leave the base through the Beta gate, which had less traffic. Outside the base was a free firing area with a depth of 100 yards, which was filled with trigger mines. On the high steel walls of the base, the heavy machine guns, automatic machine guns and electromagnetic artillery of the Federal Marines were constantly monitoring the area. The wars of the 25th century were not completely different from those of hundreds of years ago. On the ground, the army still pursued the strategy of heavy artillery fire coverage and tank and infantry advancement. Landmines did not withdraw from the stage of history. Instead, they were replaced by intelligent induction mines with more powerful power and more sensitive triggering mechanisms. Augustus and his soldiers followed the bustling crowd across the free shooting area. The night sky was exceptionally pure at this time. 2 jade-like moons hung above their heads, making the night of Turisis brighter than the earth. There was another moon on the other side of Turris. The tidal influence of this planet was far greater than that of ordinary solid planets. Soon Augustus arrived at a town called Braddock, the nearest town to their base. This was the nearest town to them. The nearest settlement was 20 miles away. Turris' second was previously a colony of the Terran Federation, so most of the residents here were closer to the Federation army, but this proportion was actually far less optimistic than the Turris' command center and the combat command had imagined. A considerable number of local residents still lost their homes due to the war and became Kel-morian slaves, anarchists and desperate interstellar refugees. Even in the area, controlled by the Marines, Federal soldiers must be careful of black guns that may come out from any corner. Braddock town is built on a desert oasis. Most of the buildings are square dark brown alloy buildings. The materials of these buildings were delivered from orbit by interstellar freight companies decades ago. Such young colonies are more common in the pioneering era. The residents here have survived for more than 2 generations. This town is not without buildings of other styles. Its only church is magnificent, with both the Romanesque architectural style of the Earth-era arches and columns and the gorgeousness of Rococo. The sword-shaped cross on the spire of the church indicates that most of the residents here are Christians. The streets of the town are clean and tidy, and 2 rows of well-maintained street lights emit bright light. Except for the Marine recruits, who are walking around in groups of 3 or 2, Augustus rarely sees local people. At the end of the road, there is a completely different scene. There are department stores, clothing stores, and tobacco shops. The most numerous are bars and strip clubs. Out of fear of war and the army, the locals hate these impetuous boys and are afraid that they will cause trouble. But in the past 2 years, these soldiers who have just received their wages have money in their pockets and are eager to spend, always spend lavishly. The resulting industrial chain has greatly improved the economy of the town and gradually replaced the tobacco planting industry as the local economic pillar. When Augustus passed those places of feasting and drinking, he had to frown and avoid the women who pounced on him. The girls wearing flesh-colored, backless, and waist-revealing clothes seemed to be wearing only a piece of cloth. Augustus rarely looked a little embarrassed. He had never seen such a scene before. What made Augustus feel a little relieved was that there were no minors among these girls. They are great. Harnack did not hide his desire for them. This is not allowed in Chilos laws. Jim Raynor is still an innocent 18-year-old youth. Although the life in the military camp has taught him dirty words and some bad habits, he is still not used to these things. Come on, Jim, you don't understand the good of women. The new recruit Kurt Josephine of the Caher family put his arm around Raynor's shoulders, with a meaningful smile on his face. As a stealing noble, the handsome Josephine is already a veteran in the love field. He has had many women, but it is precisely because of this that he joined the army after graduation to avoid the limelight. Augustus still hasn't figured out what stupid things Josephine has done that forced her to run to such a hellhole. Maybe things like getting the daughter of the chairman of the Universal Enterprise pregnant will not appear in major newspapers and news websites, so he has no idea what happened. Harnack followed Josephine and wanted to drag Raynor's fellow countryman Omo to the strip club. The latter was very resistant and blushed anxiously. Isn't this bad? Raynor looked at Omo. At this time, the lamps at the entrance of the strip club, which were similar to revolving lanterns, projected dark red light and shadows similar to naked women on the ground at the entrance. The decoration of the entire club had strong sexual implications. Under such circumstances, the scene was once very chaotic. I heard that Kel-morian spies often mix in here, Hank. If you want to die in the girl's bed, don't drag Omo. Augustus called Harnack's last name, which would make the other party immediately understand that he should stop, and now is not the time to make trouble. Okay. Harnack let go of Renault, spread his hands and said, "Boss, don't tell me that you just don't like the old women here." After that, Harnack and Josephine hugged the girls standing on the street, and several recruits behind Augustus stretched their necks and were eager to try, but just because Augustus didn't seem to like the place, they finally suppressed the heat in their hearts. Augustus wrote down the location and name of this place and continued to move forward. His goal was the largest bar in the area. Just ignore them. Renault followed with mixed feelings. He had to admit that his will might not be as strong as he thought. Those beautiful girls left a deep impression on him. Renault was ashamed to admit that he actually blushed just now. Josephine is sensible. As for Harnack, well, I'm indeed not very reassured, but perhaps only real villains can thrive in a place full of filth and dirt. Augustus replied. Why don't you follow? He asked Renault again. I'm only 18 years old. What would my mother think if she knew? I really don't want to disappoint her. Renault said embarrassedly. Maybe one day, someone like you will also become a generation of love saints. Haha. Augustus looked at Renault and laughed. The recruits behind him seemed to have heard some big joke. For a while, everyone was laughing at Renault. Go to hell. Renault could only curse. In this way, this group of recruits wearing maroon uniforms, flat caps and shiny leather boots walked into a bar called Bloody Mary. According to hygiene and military regulations, their leather jackets and trousers with wide pockets were ironed straight with sonic irons, and there were 2 white trouser lines about a quarter of an inch wide on the trousers extending from top to bottom to the trouser legs. The uniform and neat dress made these recruits look less like a mob. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15 Bloody Mary Bar. Like other bars in Braddock, Bloody Mary's was packed with Marine recruits. The floor of the bar was covered with soft solid wood floors, which were full of traces of smoke and fire, and some places would creak when stepped on. The walls with wood textured wallpaper were hung with some huge beast heads and furs, and next to these trophies were some rusty cold weapons and wooden handled revolvers. Unlike the military bar, Bloody Mary's radio was always playing fast-paced metal music, local rap and a whole section of meaningless noise, which made the bar very noisy, and even the voices of people talking could not be heard clearly. The gorgeous laser lights rendered Bloody Mary's into a colorful world, and the smell of alcohol and smoke made people dizzy. Young people were easily infected by such an atmosphere. They shouted, drank and reveled. This fanatical atmosphere reached a climax when several tall bar girls appeared, and they danced on the stage made of iron frames and curtains. The girls were dancing hotly, while taking off their few clothes. Augustus had just noticed that they were almost naked. They casually threw their close-fitting silk clothes into the crowd under the stage, which immediately attracted a disgusting scene of scrambling. Some people were willing to fight to the death for these palm-sized clothes. Augustus, Renault and others found a long table for 10 people, sat down and started ordering wine and food. Compared with those wanton women who made Renault and others stare with wide eyes, blushing and reluctant to look away, Augustus was more interested in the menu. The owner of the bar may be very fond of the works of ancient Shakespeare on Earth. There is a line of Shakespeare's poem at the end of each page of the menu. The dishes here are much more than those in the army. In addition to fried food, there are many other dishes, such as beef pies, potato cakes and vegetable salads. Some of the dishes sounded unheard of, such as canned alien starfish, grilled Umagen beetle larvae, and iced char volcano slugs. Augustus noticed that, although this was a distant world 60,000 light years away from Earth, and it had been nearly 200 years since the first colony mothership from Earth arrived in Tarsus, humans still had a close connection with the culture of Earth civilization. The host computer of the colony mothership stored all the wisdom of human civilization, and science, art, music and other most precious spiritual wealth of mankind were completely preserved. Therefore, humans of this era still understood some ancient literature, and many books about ancient great men, myths, religions, and history were still circulated in the human world of the Korhal sector. Therefore, the names of people, cities, and planets can still be found in the mythological systems of Nordic and Greek. Of course, this is a customary practice of those upper-class people who claim to be aristocrats. In the fringe galaxies, people who only want to survive don't care whether the name of the place where they live has any origin or meaning. The main livestock that were widely raised on Earth, such as cows, sheep, chickens and ducks, are also available in the Korhal sector. The hibernation chambers of the colony motherships store the embryos and living bodies of tens of millions of Earth creatures and seeds of plants, so that the colonists can breed livestock and open farms in the unknown new world after the spacecraft lands. Therefore, it is not unbelievable to eat grilled steak and drink beer brewed from barley in the Korhal sector. Augustus ordered a fried chicken and beer. The scantily clad waiter really looked at him a few more times and made provocative gestures. The soldiers next to him immediately started to make a noise. Would you like one? Here are morphine, crabs and mice. My god, baby, you are so handsome. The waiter had long pink wavy hair and a pretty good chest. When she leaned over to ask Augustus, her face was almost touching him. We don't need drugs, ma'am. If you don't mind, I also suggest that you don't touch those things. Augustus noticed that she was a little bit mentally abnormal, her eyes were blurred, and she was in a state of extreme excitement. What's the matter, sir? Are you staying for the party tonight? It's going to be a beautiful night. We still need a few pretty girls for Bloody Mary. Augustus didn't want to dwell on this issue anymore. At the same time, he knew what to do to ignite the enthusiasm of a group of LSPs. Sure enough, the other people in his class shifted their attention and began to cheer. The waitress turned and left, her waist twisted intentionally, and there were many whistles around, and from time to time someone reached out to touch her butt. How many people were forced to come here because of the war? Renault, who was sitting next to Augustus, suddenly asked in a low voice. In this noisy environment, Renault's voice was like a grain of sand falling into the sea, and it was drowned before it caused any waves. She's wearing heavy makeup, so she's actually much younger. There are more than 30 bars in Braddock, and there may be 1,000 streetwalkers and strippers. Augustus said, the nearest city to here was reduced to ruins 2 years ago. 1 million people lost their homes and jobs. But the Federation and Kel-morian don't plan to resettle these people, so they can only flee desperately. You know, it's a long way from hell to here, even by magnetic rail. This is really hell on earth. Raynor's voice became dull. But if you've been to Tarsus, you'll know that it's even more prosperous than before the war. Augustus drank a glass of number 8 whiskey and said with emotion, those bastards. Raynor thought of his family's farm that was on the verge of bankruptcy due to the war, which made him feel worse. He couldn't imagine how terrible it would be if Shiloh became a war zone. While the edge world was devastated by war, the nobles of Tarsus were busy filling their pockets. They soon didn't have to think about these troubles, because before Augustus's girl arrived, another group of federal soldiers rushed into the Bloody Mary bar, about 40 or 50 people. Unlike Augustus's maroon uniform, these soldiers wore white stand-up collar uniforms, with black space environment tights underneath. The badge on the right chest of the uniform was a regular triangle with a golden eagle in the center. Fleet. The gray-haired and blue-eyed Lundstein looked at those people. One of the businesses of Lundstein's family business provided fuel and replacement parts for the fleet. Such badges were very familiar to him. Hey, I don't like those fleet soldiers. There were not only new recruits in the bar, but also many engineers working in the base and some veteran marines and sergeants drinking here. When they saw the fleet soldiers, they immediately murmured in dissatisfaction, look at how weak they are. How can they fight? The lively atmosphere suddenly stagnated. The Marine Corps and the fleet have always been at odds. Since their establishment, the two branches of the military have always disliked each other and enjoyed making fun of each other. Who knows which fleet has stayed in the high altitude orbit of Tarsus recently? Augustus asked. Looking at their badges, they should be from Alpha Squadron. According to the publicly available Tarsus second starport log, the battle cruiser that may stay in synchronous orbit can only be the Otto von Bismarck, which is a behemoth class. Runstein said after thinking for a while. In the official novel, Alpha Squadron has Bismarck and Napoleon, as well as Nelson V, and the others are basically names from Nordic Greek mythology. Chapter 16. Battle between Marines and Fleets. The Marines from the main base of Tarsus and the fleet soldiers from Alpha Squadron stared at each other for a few seconds. Then the leading sergeant major of the fleet waved his hand and led his men to find a few empty seats to sit down. Before they sat down, a fleet soldier suddenly stumbled when he walked to his chosen seat. In fact, there were no Marines beside him, and there were only his own people within 3 yards, but this directly became the fuse. The Marines tripped me. At this time, another fleet soldier who was standing firmly suddenly shouted loudly, beat the hell out of them. The Marines also cheered, and a technical sergeant took the lead and rushed forward. The two groups of people suddenly fought into a group. For a moment, about 60 Marines in maroon and brown uniforms, and fleet soldiers in black uniforms fought together, and food, wine and everything on the table were knocked to the ground. The bartender at the front desk looked at this scene calmly. Obviously, such things happen here from time to time. The wood grain painted tables and chairs were actually alloy castings, firmly embedded in the steel bars under the floor with screws and nuts. Even if a group of bulls were colliding with each other for a mate, they could not be shaken. "Gentlemen, sirs, please stop," the boss shouted, while wiping the crystal wine glass in his hand. His pale face was trembling due to the excessive intake of chemical hallucinogens. The sheriff's military police are on their way, but no one listened to him. The fight was getting more and more intense. The people fighting each other were like ink dripped into a petri dish, like dominoes collapsing, spreading rapidly in the bar. That was not very spacious. Even those who didn't want to get involved were dragged in. The soldiers who were embracing each other overturned table after table of food. When the beer bottles thrown randomly hit the heads of innocent people and their own comrades, the situation immediately became out of control. Everything on the table was overturned to the ground. The broken pieces of vases and glasses sparkled under the bright lights, and the women began to scream and wail. It seemed like only a moment, and when Augustus and others came to their senses, they were already involved. Tom Ormo, a childhood friend of Renault, was the first to be affected. A red-eyed fleet soldier threw a plate of leftover fried chicken on his face. Before Ormo could react, the other party hit him to the ground with a heavy punch and beat him up. The one who knocked Ormo down was a veteran of the fleet. Ormo, who had just graduated from the boot camp, was no match for him. "Someone help me." Alan Drunstein, Lee Puchinin and Ilya Kilovsky, who were beside Ormo, immediately rushed up. Ilya kicked the fleet soldier in the shoulder, and then the four of them, including Ormo, started a righteous beating. The situation doesn't seem good. Renault looked around and began to look for other exits from the bar. But at this time, they were surrounded by soldiers fighting each other. There was no way to escape, and they had to avoid flying bottles and other messy things. At this time, it was impossible to stay out of it. In a blink of an eye, there were soldiers twisting in a ball everywhere. Even in this era, where interstellar immigration has become sparse and common, and the homeworld of mankind is getting wider and wider, the contradictions between the military branches are still irreconcilable. They don't have as many people as us. Augustus stood up and said to Raynor, "I just counted roughly, and the Marine Corps can have at least 200 people, which is several times the fleet. Let's go. We will break out from the front." Before Raynor could answer, Augustus had climbed onto the table with his chair, and his voice even drowned out the soldiers' curses and screams for a while. "Marines, follow me." For a while, everyone in the bar looked up at him, but most of them were at a loss, because they didn't know Augustus. After Augustus jumped off the table, Harnack picked up the bottle and rushed out first, followed by Raynor. The rest of the D Company's 2nd Platoon, 1st Squad, moved toward Augustus, and several Marines who were close also joined them. The first opponent Harnack encountered was a corporal from the fleet, who was over 7 feet tall. He was tall enough to dominate the crowd in the bar, and he was a head taller than everyone else. The corporal pounced on Harnack like a running, angry brown bear, and the latter cleverly bent down to avoid the pounce, and then punched the opponent in the soft abdomen. It was obvious that the opponent was just a show-off, who knelt on the ground and vomited after a few punches, while Harnack was the most enthusiastic hooligan in his hometown. Harnack then used the same method to knock down 2 more fleet soldiers, and Renault and the others also killed several more. At this time, the bar was in chaos. Each soldier fought for himself, and a dozen Marines who were close together immediately became a force that could not be ignored. Augustus led his men to drag out the men in fleet uniforms from the crowd and beat them up until they lost the ability to stand, and then threw them to the ground. The harder they resisted, the harder they were beaten. The fleet had fewer soldiers than the Marines, and every time Augustus and his companions killed a fleet soldier, more Marines would join them. No one could stop Augustus on his way to the main entrance of the hotel, and by the time he reached the door, there were already about 30 or 40 people gathered around him, and a pile of Marines and fleet soldiers were lying on the ground. Today happened to be the first day of graduation for the new recruits. The fleet had just arrived in Terran recently, and when they were picking a fight, they didn't notice that there were many more Marines in the bar than before, and they didn't expect the other side to be so united. But no matter what, the fleet was defeated in today's conflict. On average, this bar would have a conflict every week, and it would be renovated every half a month, but no one had ever taken the lead in organizing or leading it. The participants in the fights were all from different battalions, companies, and departments, with no cohesion at all. After the fight, everyone went back to their own homes and looked for their own mothers. In the past, the battle was always fierce, and the military police came before the winner was decided. The fleet suffered a great loss this time. When Augustus stood at the door of the Bloody Mary bar and looked back inside, the Marines who followed him gathered around him consciously or unconsciously. At a certain moment, the only sound in the bar was the music, and everyone looked at Augustus' cold grey eyes. If Augustus gave orders like a commander at this time, many people would execute them without hesitation. This calm did not last long. Soon, Augustus heard the harsh whistle of the military police. "What are you waiting for? Run." As soon as Augustus finished speaking, the sound of dozens of pairs of leather boots stepping on the stone floor at the same time came from the street, and there was even the sound of the engine of a military reconnaissance vehicle. Gang fighting is actually not a big deal in the Marine Corps. At most, they will be locked up for a day or two, but no one is willing to surrender. All of a sudden, the Marines and fleet soldiers in the bar ran away. As for those who couldn't even get up or fainted, they could only blame themselves for their bad luck. Augustus, well done. Raynor didn't forget to praise Augustus while running away. Fleet bastards. I've been annoyed with them for a long time. Good job. There were also continuous cheers. Augustus, who was running in the front, looked back and found that there were people behind him, including the fleet soldiers of Alpha Squadron. At least half of the people in the bar followed him. Don't all follow me. Run apart. Thank you for the monthly tickets from coughing to death. Weird Night Skies chant. 6,222,656 plus 4. Eliusiting. Red-haired Yama. Commandlsh. Lotus Root Stew Dragon. And Aoa Harklam. Thank you for the rewards from Lotus Root Stew Dragon, Drunk Dream 1991, and Weird Night Skies chant. Thank you for your support. Chapter 17. Vulture Car Racing. The soldiers following Augustus suddenly sobered up after hearing his words. So many people were running like a drill on the street, as if they were afraid that the military police didn't know they were there. So every 10 steps, a group of people turned into another street or alley. These people were active soldiers who were very familiar with Braddock Town and knew where to run. The remaining 20 or so recruits were completely in the dark. The recruits could only continue to follow Augustus, hoping that Augustus could lead them to escape the pursuit of the military police. Augustus was also in Braddock Town for the first time. He realized that the best thing for him to do at this moment was to run along the main road of the street, because they didn't know where the side roads and alleys beside the road would eventually lead to. But unless Augustus could outrun the car, they would be caught up sooner or later. "I have an idea," Raynor, who was following Augustus, suddenly said. "If you have an idea, tell me now." Hannock on the other side shouted loudly with rapid breathing. "The gendarmes came by car," Raynor said. "I bet they are parked in front of the bar right now. They're busy arresting people inside and don't have time to care about the cars." Augustus stopped, and the people behind him stopped in confusion. No one ran past him at this time. "Follow me." Augustus turned left at the T-shaped intersection in front and entered a dark and deep alley with no lights. The alley was so narrow that it was difficult for two recruits to walk side by side. Although the recruits behind Augustus didn't know what he wanted to do, they followed Augustus closely after a few seconds of hesitation. No one asked them why they did this, they just followed him. In fact, they had only run more than 100 meters at this time, and it wouldn't take long for them to return to the door of the bar, but going back at this time would only run into the pursuers. Augustus asked everyone to keep quiet, so the recruits who smelled of alcohol all crowded in the alley and didn't move. There was no light here. The alley walls were covered with blue prefabricated panels to block the rain. Even the moonlight at night could not shine in. The recruits waited anxiously for 2 or 3 minutes until they heard the sound of the military police reconnaissance vehicle approaching from afar and then quickly leaving. "Everyone, get out, run back," Augustus shouted again in a low voice after the engine sound completely disappeared. A group of people rushed out of the alley again and ran in the original direction. At this time, the steps of the recruits were no longer as chaotic and disorderly as when they just escaped from the bar, but they were still like a group of cockroaches running around. At this time, 2 military police wearing red shoulder straps were standing at the door of the bar. They looked at the more than 20 soldiers in the uniforms of the Marines running past them in astonishment, but they wondered if they were dazzled. Augustus found the military police vehicles in a simple awning outside the Bloody Mary bar. Most of the vehicles had driven away, but there were still 5 vulture vehicles and a battlefield assault vehicle with a standard load of 900 pounds. The military police probably didn't expect the escaped recruits to suddenly come back, and there was no one to guard these ownerless vehicles. The battlefield assault vehicle still uses 4 wheels to drive close to the ground, while the vulture vehicle is a hovering vehicle, and its appearance is like a sharp 3-edged thorn. The vulture vehicle is suspended a few inches above the ground through magnetic levitation. With the addition of plasma thrusters, these thunder vehicles that rush on the battlefield can reach speeds of 200 to 300 miles per hour. The Army's vulture vehicle is far wilder than the modified motorcycle that Augustus drove at the Hastel Spirit Academy, and is more dangerous and exciting than the customized hover bikes that all the noble children on the racing field are proud of. Due to the lack of armor, the vulture vehicle is usually used as a vehicle for scouts, but in the hands of the Marines, they can always be played with, and all kinds of strange and illegal modifications have emerged. "I want the gray-green one." Raynor chose a vulture. "I've been driving harvesters on my farm for half my life, so driving this shouldn't be difficult. So, brothers, who wants to sit in the passenger seat? I'm afraid you'll have to sit in your car. There are too many of us," Augustus said to him. "I, Raynor, Runstein, Omo and Benjamin will drive. A vulture will sit 3 people. This is the load-bearing limit. The rest of you will sit in the assault vehicle. Brandon, this car is yours." "I can't drive a vulture." Tom Omo blushed. He did drive a harvester and a freight truck, but he didn't try the real man bumper car modified with a magnetic suspension motorcycle in the underground racetrack in Shiloh like Raynor did. "I don't have the confidence." "I'm glad you had the courage to say it, otherwise someone would be in trouble." Augustus nodded at him, and everyone else laughed at his joke, so no one had time to laugh at Omo. "Let me do it. I've driven something similar. Those were glorious years." A new recruit with some graying hair on his temples said calmly amid the laughter. Augustus didn't recognize him. He was from another recruit company. "Hurry up and get in the car. They'll react soon." Augustus interrupted everyone's laughter and boarded a vulture with a bright red shell and a blue driver's seat. The others immediately followed suit. Connor Ward sat in the seat behind Augustus. The vulture was originally a single-person armed vehicle, and the seat had reached its limit for accommodating 2 people. Ilya Kilovsky could only lie on the hood. To ensure that he would not be thrown away, Augustus got out of the car and used a restraint stretch belt found on the seat to tie him tightly to the vulture. The vulture sank a little due to the unbearable weight. The control panel under the windshield flashed red and issued a disturbing alarm. Augustus didn't care. He called up the 3-dimensional map of the town and asked the smart computer to list several routes back to the fortress. Then, Augustus started the engine and fumbled to open the jet valve of the plasma thruster. The vulture under his crotch immediately flew out. The vulture reached a speed of 200 miles per hour in a very short time and was still accelerating. Augustus's vulture was like a jet fighter flying off the ground, speeding through the not-so-wide streets of Braddock at a frightening speed. Ward held Augustus' waist, his face livid, as if he had lost the ability to breathe. Kilovsky, who was usually the bravest in the class, was hung on the hood, and it seemed that he would be thrown out in the next second, which forced him to let out a shrill, distorted scream like a woman, and thought he was on the way to heaven. Only Augustus was calm, because once he grasped the upper steering handle, driving the vulture seemed to be his instinct. Out of interest, Augustus started driving a hover racing car when he was a child. Now every racing car he puts in the private garage under the family skyscraper is not comparable to the toys of ordinary drag racers. At night in Braddock, almost all the townspeople heard a series of creaking sounds. This was not the sound of the Vulture's engine, but the sound of its chassis scraping against the ground due to excessive load, causing sparks to splash. The sheriff's old motorcycle had no way to deal with these speeding gangs. Oh, Hannock screamed excitedly. Chapter 18 Horace Warfield. Chapter 18 Horace Warfield. The late night racing gangs in Braddock were finally punished. The military police responded quickly and efficiently set up checkpoints at the four gates of Telesis. Despite this, when Augustus and a group of Marines walked in with a swagger, they almost got away with it. Augustus was not, until he was locked up in the detention room, that he learned from a military policeman that, in order to catch the fish that slipped through the net, there were military personal information collection terminals at the door and inside every bar in Braddock, and everyone's facial recognition features would be recorded. In fact, every soldier in the Bloody Mary bar could not escape from the beginning, but at least this experience was enough for Augustus and his racing gang to brag to others. Because of stealing the Vulture car, Augustus and others' imprisonment was extended to 1 week. However, Augustus knew that the military police could only detain them for 2 more days at most, and the frontline troops who urgently needed new recruits would not let them take another 5 days of comfortable vacation. Maximum. Move your feet. Augustus and the other 9 people in his class were locked up in the same crowded cell, sleeping on a concrete floor covered with hardwood planks. And they were not really on vacation after all, so they had no food to eat, and no place to take a shower the whole night, and could only sleep in wet clothes. If that were the case, the second row and the first squad had to share the same uncovered flush toilet. You can't blame me for this. You have to ask the jailers why they don't make it more spacious. Xander Maximum retorted in a louder voice. I don't care whose responsibility it is. Move away. Benjamin Crandall's face was livid. He was sandwiched between Xander Maximum, Tom Momo and Ilya Kilovsky, and his body, which was much taller and stronger than the others, could not move. Although Benjamin was once a monk in the monastery in his hometown, his temper was much worse than that of the others. Damn it, we are not prisoners. Alan Grunstein complained. Augustus was awakened by the noise and checked the time on his watch. If you need to pee, hurry up. Visitors are coming in soon. Don't poop naked in front of the guests. If you need to poop, hold it in. Renault added. Gentlemen, hold your pee steady and don't pee on the ground. The detention room was originally an armory. Now the weapons and armored vehicles inside have been cleared out. Metal baffles are used to separate the compartments into open compartments to detain unruly soldiers and criminals. Above Augustus and others is a high support dome of the armory. The only light here is the sunlight coming in through the vents and windows, and the emergency lights in the detention room will only be turned on under specific circumstances. There is a 3-foot wide fingerprint door on the south and north walls. The top third of the fingerprint door is highly transparent tempered glass, which means that you can see everything from the outside, but it is the same from the inside. When Augustus looked at the fingerprint door on the south, he suddenly saw a swaying figure. It was a military policeman in a black uniform. Is it Hank and Josephine? Jim Raynor, who was beside Augustus, also noticed it, but he obviously didn't believe his own statement. Based on my understanding of the two of them, they must be drunk now. They won't know that we were wiped out by the military police until they return to the barracks tonight, and then they will continue to make up for their sleep without a care. The fingerprint door was opened, and it was not the military police who came in, but an officer in a Marine uniform. The silver vertical bar on his shoulder indicated that he was a lieutenant. The lieutenant had a sharp, thin and dark face, with marks left by wind, sun and extreme environment. He had a short-lipped mustache, a crew cut and black hair. Are you Augustus Mengsk? The lieutenant pursed his wide lips and stared into Augustus' cold grey eyes. This soldier had a cold and seriousness that could only be tempered by real experience of war and death. Although Augustus concluded that the officer was no more than 30 years old, the playfulness and frivolity of young people were far from it. I am. Augustus looked at the lieutenant without giving in. I'm Horace Warfield, the commander of the 1st Company, 5th Battalion, 14th Brigade, 33rd Ground Assault Division. The lieutenant's iron-like face actually showed a smile, but it was fleeting. This name reminded Augustus of the old general of the Terran Empire who died in the heart of the swarm campaign in the game. He tried to connect the image in his memory with the young officer, but soon gave up. It's the division of Arcturus. Augustus suddenly thought of something. Yes, it's your brother. Warfield nodded and continued. According to the replenishment notice issued by the Division Command Center, from today on, your recruit platoon will be affiliated with the 33rd Assault Division. Sir, I think this means that the military police at the main base of Telesis will no longer be able to detain us, Augustus said. So I came here early in the morning to pick up people. Warfield didn't give Augustus any good face. Boy, this is not a glorious thing. At least I wrote 4 self-criticisms. Augustus spread his hands. Then Augustus woke up a few guys who were still sleeping soundly and followed Warfield out of the prison cell. Although they didn't know what happened, the few recruits who were still confused were overjoyed that they were released. Facing Lieutenant Warfield with a serious expression, the recruits were very tactful and didn't ask if they could continue their vacation. Warfield's Sabre command car was parked at the door of the armory. Although the car was spacious enough, it was still a bit difficult to squeeze in 10 people, including one of Warfield's adjutants. Fortunately, Hannah Kank was not there, so no one would complain. You drive to the Starship launch port. Warfield said to Augustus, I heard from the military police that you are a good driver. I'd love to try the command car, sir. Augustus got into the car with ease and without any hesitation. Driving this type of car is just a piece of cake for him, and the satellite navigation that has been set up long ago will tell him where the destination is. If you are not afraid that I will drive it into a ditch. Haha, you'd better not do that. Warfield, who was sitting in the co-pilot seat, said with a smile. Perhaps because Warfield was a new recruit under Augustus' brother Augustus Mengsk, and the initial impression was quite good, he behaved quite easily in front of Augustus. I remember that the last time Arcturus wrote to me, the address was still on the planet on Sigma. When the car started, Augustus talked about his brother. That was last month, Warfield replied. The Kel-morians have withdrawn from the Sigma system, so we were ordered to come here to reinforce them. This is a good sign. The Kel-morians are going to be finished, Augustus said as he drove. I hope the war will end by next year at the latest, Warfield said. I think that's not difficult to achieve. Augustus nodded. The two stopped talking, and Augustus drove the command vehicle to the boarding platform of the main base of Telesis. Along the way, he saw many transport trucks full of soldiers and a company after company of Goliath armed robots. Augustus was very unfamiliar with the numbers and emblems of these troops. At the same time, in the distance, that they could see an extremely magnificent battle cruiser was slowly driving out of the clouds, casting a huge, moving shadow at the end of the horizon. Sir, my 2 soldiers are still in Braddock Town. At this time, Augustus remembered the 2 guys who were almost forgotten by him. Specific location? Warfield frowned. Augustus said the name of a strip club. Thanks to coughing to death, summer tiredness, Reading Lover Alim, Clement 001, and Zaristad for their monthly tickets. Thank you for your support. Chapter 19 33rd Ground Assault Division Empire. Chapter 19 The 33rd Ground Assault Division. The 33rd Ground Assault Division of the Empire belongs to the 4th Army of the Sigma Legion. This is an army known for its blitzkrieg and unstoppable assault. Its predecessor was a ground assault detachment in the Sigma system. After a 2-year tug-of-war with the Kel-morian army, this assault detachment was constantly broken up, reorganized and expanded, while retaining its number. It now has 5 army brigades, 2 armored regiments and an engineering corps. The commander of this ground assault division is Augustus Mengsk, the first heir of the Mengsk family. 10 years ago, the eldest son of the Mengsk family was still an unknown private soldier. The unit that Augustus originally commanded was named the Imperial Squad by him. Similarly, this tradition continues to this day. Another name for the 33rd Ground Assault Division is the Imperial Assault Division, and its emblem is the Sigma giant wolf with a red background. The brigade station, where Augustus is located, is quite far away from the main base of Telesis, and it takes 4 hours to arrive by transport plane. In fact, Warfield didn't have to come here in person. He didn't have to think about who gave the order. At 14:45 Northern Hemisphere Standard Time on Telesis 2nd, Augustus and the new recruits from the 2nd Platoon boarded an Apod 4 engine low ground heavy transport aircraft. This type of transport aircraft is more than enough to carry a platoon of soldiers who are not wearing power armor, but they can only squeeze into 2 crew cabins, and the remaining space is filled with supply boxes and ammunition. When the transport aircraft slowly took off, the bulkhead of the transport aircraft was fully enclosed, without portholes, and all the new recruits could only rely on personal terminals and chat to pass the time. Hank and Kurt Josephine sat across from Augustus with their heads down. In sharp contrast to them was the gloating expressions on the faces of Renault and others. Augustus could almost imagine the blank expressions on their faces when they were dragged out of bed by Warfield's adjutant. When the soft jade was in their arms or they were sleeping soundly, someone suddenly rushed in and told them that their vacation had ended early. This was not the worst. When the decent Warfield heard that they were going in and out of such places, his face was quite unpleasant. He clearly told them not to think about such things during their service. But the good news was that, because a new war was approaching, the entire boot camp's vacation was cancelled. Fortunately, these two people didn't care about anything. Within 5 minutes, they put this matter behind their minds, and then began to scramble to brag to Augustus and others about their heroic deeds last night. Later, Renault also told the people in the 2nd squad about his driving the Vulture car, which soon developed into the whole platoon listening to the bragging of the 1st squad. During the flight, Augustus could only browse the pre-downloaded official website of the Federal Marine Corps, which contained war reports on the exchange between the Terran Federal Marine Corps and the orbital fleet and the Kel-morian, ranging from the contact between the scouts of the two sides and the desert town on the edge world to the competition for large cities and even planets. The arrival of the 33rd Ground Assault Division and other planetary troops also proves that the balance of power between the Terran Federation and the Kel-morians on Telesis is about to be broken. At present, the Terran Federation is still sending a large number of troops to this planet. It can be predicted that the combat command of the Federation Marine Corps is planning a decisive battle that will determine the ownership of the entire planet. These are not what the officers in the boot camp will tell them. The non-commissioned officers will only say that, although the Kel-morians are fierce and cunning, the Marines are enough to deal with them. Sweat more during training, and there will be less blood on the battlefield. The future war on Telesis 2nd is both a danger and an opportunity for Augustus. Whether in the game, or in the current StarCraft world, living Marines are the least valuable. But if Augustus can get promoted and become a senior non-commissioned officer or commander, it will also be of great benefit to his future life. Instead of praying like a coward that the shells will not fall on him all day long and leaving life and death to fate, Augustus would rather accumulate reputation and military merits from scratch. If he was lucky enough, Augustus might get a few medals in the battle and become a non-commissioned officer before the end of the war. If everything went well, Augustus would retire according to the demobilization process and return to Korhal to inherit the family business. He would persuade his father to give up the idea of rebelling against the Terran Federation and be a nobleman in peace. Augustus lacked the ambition and control that seemed to be innate in the Mengsk family. After all, revolution and salvation had nothing to do with him. He was no longer at the age of having the world in his heart and dreaming of becoming a savior. At first, the transport plane flew quite smoothly all the way, but in the second half of the flight, everyone felt the strong turbulence of the airflow, and Augustus had to put down his personal terminal and hold the handrail tightly. Then Warfield told them through the loudspeaker that at least 2 formations of Kel-morian hellhounds were chasing them, but please be patient. The Kel-morian Hellfire fleet rarely dares to go deep into our controlled area, but there are always exceptions. The lieutenant said. Most of the recruits were in a panic because the transport ship had already begun to roll and rotate, constantly turning to avoid the missile lock. All the recruits could only pray that the Kel-morian hellhounds could not catch up with their prey, although they all knew it was only a matter of time. For a while, the transport plane continued to make various difficult and large-angle evasive maneuvers. Augustus felt dizzy and upside down, which was much more exciting than the suspended roller coaster at the Stilling Center amusement park. We are going to be finished. Tomomo held his face and said, "Mom, forgive me, Mom. Oh, this pilot's flying skills are really bad. Although Renault had never driven a spaceship, it did not prevent him from saying bad things. At this time, Hannock was cheering and shouting. Josephine was shouting and cheering. Ward had no expression on his face. Xander's face was pale, and Benjamin kept praying. There was another more violent shaking, and Augustus's seat was shaking violently. If they had not been tied tightly to their seats by their safety belts, they would have been thrown against the cabin wall and smashed into a bloody mess. The warning light above their heads also changed from soft blue to flashing red. "We've been hit." Lieutenant Warfield's voice was a little louder, but he was still calm. The transport plane flipped over, and the recruits saw the rotating cabin roof. Augustus felt that he was falling. Chapter 20, Poker's Pride. The Apod 4 engine near-Earth transport aircraft was trailing black smoke. Although the pilot tried his best to control the balance of the spacecraft, the transport aircraft still tilted towards the ground thousands of feet away like a rag falling from the sky. Gravity was pulling it towards death. "We are about to land. Hold on tight," Warfield said in the loudspeaker. At the last moment, the transport aircraft finally regained its balance. After gliding smoothly for dozens of seconds, the passengers encountered the first impact. The belly of the spacecraft landed first. Augustus felt as if he had hit a hard granite head-on, and his internal organs were squeezed into a ball. For a moment, the fear of death occupied Augustus' heart. The transport aircraft slid on the ground, and every time it encountered a small hard protrusion, it would jump high and fall heavily. Augustus was completely speechless, and couldn't even shout. He just felt that his bones were about to fall apart. The transport plane finally stopped after several minutes or even longer. Fortunately, they did not crash into a ridge or any other obstacle that would have killed everyone. The alarm sounded endlessly, and the warning light flashed a dangerous red light. In the dizziness, Augustus saw a pair of hands reaching out to him. "We have to leave quickly." It was Renault's voice. "This ship is a sitting duck on the ground. Damn it, where are our military planes? Are they all pigs?" Augustus quickly regained consciousness. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up with the help of Renault's shoulders. The situation was a bit bad. There was flowing, bright red blood on the floor of the cabin. Augustus looked around. Some people had already struggled to stand up, but more people were still slumped in their seats. "Shake them all awake," Augustus said loudly. "The Kel-morian is right above our heads. If there's a heat-seeking missile, we'll all go to hell." He saw that Hannock and Xander had already stood up. "Hank, take a few people to open the cargo hold and take out all the weapons. Maximum, you and the others wake up everyone here. Open the hatch, and take all the people who are still alive out. Quickly, if you don't want to die, get moving. Oh no, go to the communication cabin to find the radio transceiver terminal." Since they were all new recruits, the officers of the training camp also stayed in the main base of Telesis. Everyone was panicked and didn't know how to deal with it. After all, the instructors of the boot camp had never taught them how to deal with such a situation. At this time, no one except Augustus stood up to command these new recruits. Even if the people in other classes were not very familiar with him, they had no time to question him at the critical moment of life and death. "Jim, Benjamin, come with me to find Warfield." After saying that, Augustus squeezed through the crowd and walked to the driver's cabin. Warfield hadn't spoken until now, which made Augustus suspect that he might have met with an accident. Both men followed Augustus without saying a word. The door of the cab was originally firmly locked, but now it was bent and damaged by the impact. At Augustus's signal, Benjamin hit the door with his shoulder again and again, and the door was severely damaged. After Augustus' heart beat nervously for a few times, the door was knocked open. As soon as he stepped into the cab, Augustus stepped into a pool of blood, which made his heart sink to the bottom immediately. The glass window of the cab was full of spider web-like cracks. The driver was Warfield's adjutant. His chest was pierced by several pieces of broken glass, and he had no breath long ago. The adjutant was also a young man not much older than Augustus. He had brown curly hair that was obviously carefully groomed, but still looked messy, and bright dark brown eyes. The rank on the shoulder strap showed that he was a staff sergeant. Before he stopped breathing, the staff officer kept his lips tightly closed, and his eyes stared into the distance. "He's dead." Raynor's face was very ugly. It was the first time they had seen such a bloody scene. The lieutenant is still alive. Benjamin saw that Warfield was still breathing. There was a cut on his forehead and blood was flowing down, but he didn't wake up for a while. Carry him out, Augustus said to Benjamin, while taking off the electromagnetic pistol worn by the staff sergeant's waist. Augustus didn't have time to close the eyes of the dead to express condolences, and he would never risk the delay to collect the body. The Kel-morian fighter must be hovering over their heads at this moment. Go. Raynor helped Benjamin lift Warfield onto his shoulders. When they returned to the crew cabin, where the recruits were, only Harnack and Runstein were left. Each of them carried C-14 electromagnetics and held an SR-8 shotgun in his hand. As soon as Augustus came out, Harnack handed him an electromagnetic rifle and said, "Two unlucky guys in the 3rd squad broke their legs, and another guy had a big hole in his stomach. God knows what happened." What exactly happened? Augustus took the gun and ran to the open hatch, asking as he ran. But this obviously involved Harnack's blind spot and knowledge, and he stammered and couldn't speak. He had a penetrating wound. He was hit by the fragments of the engine explosion. We carried him out on a simple stretcher. Lundstein answered on behalf of Harnack. He spoke clearly and without panic. There are several M1 medical kits in the cargo hold. I tried to stop the bleeding with nanocoagulants, but the effect was not very good. The wound was too big. If we can't send him to the field hospital or the air medical ship, he can only wait to die. Augustus walked out of the transport plane and found that their landing site was a city ruins, and under his feet was an 8-lane SkyTrain circular track. This circular track is located more than 1,000 feet above the ground, shuttling between hundreds of towering skyscrapers and sky towers. Looking up, you can see the clouds that seem to be within reach, and below are ant-like houses and countless highways, ramps, and bridges. It was daytime and the weather was clear. Augustus could clearly see a towering white sky tower not far from them. The sky tower was magnificent, with a huge, still slowly rotating gear surrounding its hexagonal tower. A huge metal billboard hung on the sky tower, which read, "Welcome to the Pride of Poker, salute to courage, to pilots, and to the Terran Federation." Because of the war, almost all the glass on it was broken, and the white walls were covered with black marks of burning flames and scratches of laser beams plowing through the walls. There was no light on all the floors, and from his angle, he could only see one black hole after another where the windows should have been. Some of the windows were filled with cables, desks and other large electronic equipment that had been damaged. The recruits who had escaped from the transport plane gathered a few dozen yards away from the spacecraft. Some of them crawled on the ground and stared at the sky nervously, while others looked at Augustus. Disperse. Disperse in groups of 5. Augustus walked towards them. But most people did not obey his order immediately. "Who are you? Where is Lieutenant Warfield?" A recruit looked at Augustus. "He is still in a coma. According to the battlefield regulations, the highest ranking officer will take over the command here." Augustus walked straight to the wounded man on the stretcher. "I'm Recruit Sergeant Augustus, and you are not even privates. If you don't want to obey my orders, then come up with a better plan. Are you not afraid of death? Move." The Kel-morian Hellhound's ground-to-ground high explosive missiles can kill all of us in an instant. At this time, Raynor shouted loudly. The questioning recruit was speechless, and the rest of the people did what Augustus said. Augustus walked over to the stretcher, where the injured recruit was lying. Xander, Omo and Ward were half kneeling beside the stretcher. The wounded soldier was very calm. The painkillers and tranquilizers had taken effect. His waist was wrapped in a blood-soaked bandage, and his light blue eyes looked at the sky melancholy. "Thanks to Xiao for the reward. Thanks to Zajuan for the reward. Thanks to Xiao. Shuao 201701300200650009. Liu Zitang. Canadian Suicide Soldier Buck. Zeristat. Cough to Death. And Clement 001 for the monthly tickets. Thank you for your support." Chapter 21 SkyTrain Track Base Station. "We can't abandon him," Xander said to Augustus. "I will never abandon any of my comrades." Augustus knelt on one knee beside the wounded and said to him, "You will definitely survive." "Sir, I'm going to die." The wounded's voice was unusually weak and calm. "Although I don't know much, he looks like he has lost too much blood. We should find a place to give him a blood transfusion." Omo gave his advice cautiously. I know about this too. Say something useful. Renault stood up and looked around. I brought a radio device. Omo whispered to Renault. Don't tell me you took the wrong one. Renault knew his childhood friend very well. Although Omo was not a clumsy fool, he often made a mess of things. There is only this one in there, but I don't know if it is used to transmit radio signals. There is no word on it. Omo said as he took out a black electronic device from his wide backpack, which looked like a radio. It looks like an improved old model of equipment, and it's an antique from the colonial era. It should be useful. You did a good job, Omo. Augustus took Omo's backpack and began to debug the equipment. When Augustus was very young, influenced by his family and his interests, he liked to study electronic equipment and smartphones. Although he was not proficient in this, it was not difficult for him to use such radio equipment. A triple encrypted signal will be sent directly to the nearest command center. Augustus quickly edited and sent a message for help. This is the APAD 13044 engine possum transport plane. We have been shot down and the commander, Lieutenant Warfield, is injured. We need all the support we can get. We need medics. There are seriously injured people here. The moment Augustus confirmed that the information was correct and sent it, two Kel-morian fighters appeared. This sharp-edged fighter seemed like a blade cutting the sky. The two Hellhound fighters dived from the clouds towards the Terran Federation soldiers on the train track and opened fire from a distance of 200 feet. Augustus seemed to be able to hear the sound of the Hellhound fighters' rocket pods opening. Disperse and fire. Be careful of the rockets. While Augustus was concentrating on debugging the dangerous equipment, Raynor took over the command on Augustus' behalf. He himself was extremely strategically intelligent, and this talent was clearly revealed when he was young. If Augustus was not here, then he would be the only one who could command this unit of new recruits at this moment. At the same time, although they knew that they could not shoot down the fighters, the new recruits on the train track also began to run around and fire at the Hellfire. Several new recruits tried their best to hold up a shoulder-fired individual rocket launcher. This rocket launcher was obviously designed for Marines wearing power armor, and ordinary soldiers needed several people to barely operate and aim it. As if it was shocked by the Federation soldiers on the ground, the Hellhound fighter suddenly turned from its diving posture and took off again, after drawing an arc. Then, amid the cheers of the Federal recruits, two Terran Federation Avenger fighters rose from under the train tracks, passing over their heads at a phantom speed, chasing the Kel-morian fighters that were speeding away. Did you see them? They are so cool. Raynor whistled. Where are we going now? Or should we wait for reinforcement here? Xander asked Augustus. From the current point of view, waiting here is not the best option. Augustus glanced at the injured soldier, staring at his increasingly distracted eyes, and then he looked at a mileage sign on the side of the track. We are only 1 mile away from the nearest suspension train base station, which can provide effective cover. It would be great if we could find the patrol car used by the train track administration to clean up the track garbage. This should be a war zone or an area where the two armies have been fighting over and over again. No one can guarantee that there will not be a sudden appearance of the Kel-morian team. We must act quickly. This place is too open and wide, and there is no cover. This damn place is so far away from the ground, there is really no way to go up to the sky, and no door to the ground. Raynor also said worriedly. Time passed by minute, and the Federal soldiers who had been scattered gathered around Augustus again. More and more recruits in maroon uniforms were looking at Augustus, waiting for his orders. In this silent silence, everyone was looking forward to Augustus speaking, bringing any news of the rescue team or giving orders. Augustus looked at them and realized that these young soldiers placed their hopes on him. At this time, Benjamin, who was carrying Warfield on his back, was still trying to wake up the sleepy lieutenant, but there was not even a single injection of medicine in the medical box that could be used, so he could only put the lieutenant on a stretcher. Assemble, Augustus said as he put the backpack containing the radio equipment on his shoulders. Now there were 4 reorganized squads of nearly 50 people who obeyed his command. They would live or die according to his orders. We will go east along this track. Under the organization of Augustus and Raynor, this isolated and unmanned recruit platoon formed 2 columns in an orderly manner and began to run along the circular track. since they had 4 stretchers and several heavy weapons, and they also needed to take care of the seriously injured. Augustus, who was at the front, deliberately controlled the speed while considering maintaining the formation. The high-altitude train track fell silent again. The lighting and warning lights on both sides of the track had dimmed, and from time to time there was a gust of wind, and several federal leaflets and notices blown up by the wind swirled under their feet. Augustus and the recruits walked between 2 maglev tracks. Since the maglev train had stopped running long ago, they did not have to worry about being crushed into meat paste by the speeding train. The 1-mile journey was not strenuous for Augustus and others who had received high-intensity weight-bearing running training every day during the boot camp. They soon arrived at the nearest train rail transit base station. The transportation base station is a steel tower that supports the aerial train track network. Dozens of trains or motor vehicle tracks of different heights and sizes pass through the tower's solid steel frame structure, forming an intricate and spectacular transportation network. The high-altitude circular track, where Augustus was located, was the highest one. At the top of the steel tower, they stopped on the track inside the tower and boarded the reinforced concrete platform built on the steel frame structure. Behind the platform was the train waiting room and the maintenance technician's lounge. 2 vertical downward aerial elevators could reach the ground from the top of the tower. An empty platform and a scrap takeoff and landing signal tower showed that this place could also be used as a helipad before. Out of caution and the knowledge Augustus learned in the boot camp, he sent 2 recruits with radio walkie-talkies to act as scouts. These 2 recruits were both soldiers in his own class, the brave and fearless Hank Hank and the calm and composed Amy Brandon. This was because Augustus knew his own people better, and also to take care of the emotions of other classes. After receiving the report from the scout, Augustus led people into the platform and placed the wounded in the empty waiting room. At the maintenance mechanic behind the waiting hall, Augustus found several nearly scrap trucks, a space station transport barge with its engine removed, and only an empty shell and rusted chairs that filled up most of the warehouse. The trucks were still able to move, but there was not much fuel left in the fuel tank, so they could not go very far. Augustus checked the various devices of the elevator and found that they had been damaged for a long time. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22. Kel-morian Shock Troopers. While resonating the location coordinates and waiting for the command center's reply, Augustus sent 4 soldiers carrying communication equipment and telescopes to the 2 entrances and exits on the east and west sides of the train track. One backpack that Hank brought out from the cargo hold was filled with radio walkie-talkies, and the other contained a high-power telescope. The sentry's post was selected in advance by Augustus and Renault. It was located between steel frames, street lights and metal garbage, which was concealed enough. However, before Augustus could rest for long, a few minutes later, the sentry on the side of the platform sent back bad news. A Kel-morian force riding a light reconnaissance vehicle was approaching quickly. The deadhead flags flying on their vehicles indicated that they were the notorious Wasteland Wolf Pack, the Kel-morian assault cavalry. How far are they from you? Can you count how many vehicles there are? Augustus asked the sentry he sent out, a soldier from the 2nd squad of recruits. I don't know, maybe 2,000 yards. They have 4 reconnaissance vehicles or more. The sentry spoke very quickly, and Augustus knew that he was very nervous now. Even so, the soldier still held his post and waited for the order to evacuate the sentry post. Did they slow down? Augustus asked. I think they didn't. They might still be speeding up. The sentry replied. Evacuate there. Take everything with you. Don't leave anything behind. Augustus ordered. When evacuating, pay attention to concealment. Don't let the Kel-morians find you. Yes, sir. The sentry replied. Before that, Augustus arranged everyone in the same empty waiting hall with a U-shaped corridor. During this period, he also appointed temporary squad leaders for the 2nd to 4th squads of recruits. Assemble. An enemy assault cavalry squad is approaching, and they will not exceed 20 people. Pick up your weapons and report to your squad leader. Augustus said as he walked into the hall. "This is really hell." Renault's eyes widened. "The most terrible thing now is that these recruits have just walked out of the boot camp and have no power armor." The other soldiers had the same expression. They had never expected that their first battle would be against the old Kel-morian troops. Having said that, the recruits were afraid of the first real battle with the enemy, but they did not feel desperate. The Kel-morian assault cavalry is mainly active on the planet Reading III. They do not belong to the traditional army, the marines or the fleet, but a true cavalry unit. The assault cavalry rides on the fastest reconnaissance vehicles of the Kel-morian, and often raids the outposts and settlements of the Terran Federation at a ghostly speed on the sparse grasslands of Reading III, and then retreats at the same speed. Although in all the records of the Terran Federation, the assault cavalry is not a unit that excels in frontal assaults and sieges, and they are by no means the most feared by the Federation army among the Kel-morian regular army, but the assault cavalry is definitely the most troublesome for the Federation command. The assault cavalry never participated in large-scale legionary operations, but only performed reconnaissance and sabotage missions. They came and went without a trace, as smooth as a loach. It is said that some of the assault cavalry on Reading III would also take on mercenary jobs as private individuals. When the salary was not enough, they would become colonial bandits or interstellar pirates. The almost omnipresent assault cavalry often appeared behind the federal defense line, becoming a nightmare for logistics troops, artillery troops and hospitals. The instructor who explained this unit to the recruits contemptuously called it the buzzing flies on the corpses and the maggots on the dead. It would die with a single slap, but it was disgusting. The instructors have been instilling this point in the recruits. That is, although the assault cavalry is notorious, its combat effectiveness is not that high, and it is not unbeatable. Are those bastards coming towards us? Raynor held an E9 electromagnetic rifle and loaded bullets. I don't know, but judging from the direction they are traveling, they will definitely pass by the base station where we are. Augustus said. Why are we so unlucky? Omo expressed Augustus's thoughts. At this time, everyone had assembled, except for 2 people who stayed to take care of the wounded. Augustus still had 38 people to dispatch. I remember Instructor Tavis said that a small team of Kel-morian assault cavalry usually does not have too many people. In order to increase speed, they will not wear heavy power armor, nor can they carry heavy weapons. Augustus said, assault cavalry is not good at dealing with sieges and encounters, and I believe they also lack the courage and determination to fight to the death. Augustus already had a plan in mind. They definitely couldn't escape now, and with the combat style of the assault cavalry, they would never take the initiative to attack, unless they were in an absolute advantage in terms of manpower. The best and most likely scenario is that maybe they didn't know that a transport ship full of Tyranid soldiers had made an emergency landing here. The recruits have plenty of weapons and enough manpower. With the height difference between the platform and the track, they can just launch an ambush from a high position and perhaps catch the assault cavalry off guard. This is the order. The first squad will be deployed on the left platform, the third squad will be deployed on the right platform, the second squad will be the reserve of the first squad, and the fourth squad will be the reserve of the third squad. Use chairs, tables, and scrap trucks to build a shelter on the edge of the platform. Augustus's order was concise and clear. Once they drive into the high tower base station, listen to my command and open fire immediately. The soldiers immediately took action and followed Augustus's order completely without any hesitation. At this time, the several sentinels sent by Augustus had also returned, and they brought back worse news. Needless to say, Augustus had also heard the sound of the reconnaissance vehicle's engine. Augustus immediately ran into the shelter of the first squad with Renault, took out a military telescope that Hanek had found in the transport lane, and looked in the direction of the sound. 4 Kel-morian reconnaissance vehicles had entered his field of vision. These reconnaissance vehicles were 4-wheeled vehicles that were close to the ground, not hovering vehicles, and looked very similar to jeeps. The reconnaissance vehicles were coated with dark camouflage that matched the city ruins. The flag flying high had a kilometer's logo representing the Kel-morian Federation and a skinny, shrunken dead head with skin and bones. The deep eye sockets of the dead head were dotted with red paint, and the background color of the flag was dark blue, symbolizing the turbid atmosphere of Moria due to high industrialization. Augustus' heart suddenly skipped a beat. There was a truck following behind the reconnaissance vehicles. He couldn't be sure whether it was a troop carrier or an ordinary truck, because it was obviously a civilian large tonnage truck modified by the assault cavalry. The assault cavalry seemed unaware that a group of fully armed Terran Federation soldiers were waiting for them. There was no sign of slowing down. If nothing unexpected happened, they should be able to pass through the base station in 1 or 2 minutes. Augustus estimated that the reconnaissance vehicles were only 150 yards away from the entrance of the base station. At this time, Augustus raised his right hand and made a gesture of silence, and then he took an E9 rifle from Raynor. The anti-touch safety was already on, and he immediately entered a state of focused aiming. The first reconnaissance vehicle roared into the base station, with a light machine gun mounted on it. An assault trooper wearing black goggles and painted on his face stood on the elevated seat and stared at the suddenly appeared bunker with doubts. The next moment, before the assault trooper could scream out, Augustus had already opened fire. Fire! The butt of the gun hit Augustus' shoulder heavily. Dozens of electromagnetic rifles and shotguns fired at the same time, and the red-gold flames flooded the first assault trooper reconnaissance vehicle. The assault trooper holding the machine gun was hit by dozens of bullets and torn into a pile of rotten meat by steel nails and shotguns. The assault trooper driving the car was also hit, and the unarmored reconnaissance vehicle instantly became riddled with holes and stopped in the middle of the road, spinning wildly. The reconnaissance vehicle behind hurriedly turned, but hit the barrier beside the train track while avoiding it. Several vehicles behind hurriedly braked and began to fight back, but at this time several squads had formed a crossfire network from a high position, with almost no blind spots. These assault cavalrymen became live targets in an instant, and the recruits lacked combat experience after all. They continued to shoot for dozens of seconds until all the bullets in the magazine were used up. Even Augustus's shouting did not work, and his voice was completely drowned out by the gunfire. When the recruits came to their senses, the assault cavalrymen had been shot to pieces, just like the shooting training in the boot camp. Even Augustus was surprised at their great success. Even in his opinion, this was a self-defense counterattack that was forced to start. In order to escape the fate of being massacred by the Kel-morians and to protect himself, he had to command the inexperienced recruits to take the lead. Thank you Agent Rangran for your award. Thank you for your monthly ticket from I Always Likes Loke, and thank you for your investment. Chapter 23 Crystal Mine. Although it seemed a bit redundant, Augustus still issued a ceasefire order again after the gunfire completely stopped. Augustus led Renault and several soldiers from the first squad to walk off the track. The assault cavalry reconnaissance vehicles that were pierced were full of unrecognizable body parts and flesh. It was the first time for these recruits to see such a bloody scene. Even Augustus, who had been mentally prepared, looked very unhappy. This is a beautiful ambush. Renault felt his stomach rolling. Go see what's in that truck. Augustus endured the psychological and physical discomfort to check the damage of the reconnaissance vehicle. Then he found that, unless they could find water to clean the residue and repair the damaged engine and fuel tank, these vehicles would be useless. The driver of the truck at the end of the assault cavalry convoy was also hit by a stray bullet and broke into several pieces. Augustus walked to the end of the truck, and with Renault and several other soldiers from the first squad, he fired at the compartment with his gun. After 2 magazines were emptied, he opened the compartment door under the cover of others. How many boxes? Renault slowly put down the electromagnetic rifle in his hand and checked one of the metal boxes with Augustus. There were a total of 5 such giant metal freight boxes, printed with the kilometer flag pattern, about 8 1/3 feet long and 5 feet wide, and lying on the ground. The height could reach Augustus' waist. In addition to the combination lock, each metal freight box also has a fingerprint lock and a gene lock. It is extremely strong and heavy. Augustus and Renault spent half a day trying, but couldn't move any of the containers. It's a safe, the highest priority government strategic materials. Augustus found a few lines of words on the metal freight box, from the Raffin brothers mine, sent to a starport on the Moria satellite Brutus. I guess it's gold, or something else valuable. Those Kel-morians have always been profitable. Renault said. Brother Raffin mine, I've seen this place name on the news. These should be Adian crystals, boxes of Adian crystals. Augustus's mouth corners couldn't help but rise. That's much more valuable than gold. Raynor and the other recruits looked at each other and smiled happily, but they still didn't know what they had gotten. All of this is worth about 2 million federal credits, Augustus said and sat down on the metal freight box full of crystals. Holy shit. Raynor and the recruits exclaimed and cheered, and Hanuk and Josephine hugged each other directly, much happier than when they just knew they had won. In the world of StarCraft, high purity crystal ore is not only a hard currency more precious than gold, but also the cornerstone of the development of Terran human industry and technology. The smelted crystal minerals are high quality raw materials for casting weapons, building chariots, spaceships and interstellar battleships. These precious and expensive crystal mines are the most important minerals in the entire Korhal sector and even the Milky Way, and are strategic resources that all human regimes attach great importance to. The war between the Terran Federation and the Kel-morian Union broke out precisely for these resources. But we can't get the money, Augustus said to the soldiers who were excited, pouring cold water on them. We have no way to sell these crystals, so we can only hand them over to our superiors. Then, if the officers who manage the captured materials can find their conscience and write us a report, each of us may get a little bonus. If it is filled with cash, it would be a fortune. The cheers disappeared in an instant, and the soldiers' enthusiasm for these freight boxes immediately decreased significantly. Are those good-for-nothings really deserve a medal for you, Augustus? Raynor said jokingly. We not only killed a squad of assault cavalry, but also sent them a large sum of money. That's what they should do, Augustus joked. This truck should still be usable. In my opinion, it should be no problem to carry 30 people. Raynor withdrew his eyes from the boxes. Like many new soldiers, he had the idea of taking the crystals for himself when Augustus said that number, but almost at the same time, he hated his greed from the bottom of his heart. Raynor couldn't help thinking that, if he could get this money, his family's farm would be able to repay the debts due to the high fuel prices, and pay the cost of the business license certificate that the Terran federal government forced all farmers to buy. After paying all the taxes, the Raynor family can still live a stable and wealthy life. But that was just a thought. Old Raynor had told Raynor the meaning of justice countless times. His mother taught others from a young age that they should rely on their own hard-working hands to get what they deserved. With Augustus as an example, the soldiers did not behave too badly. Let's go see if those reconnaissance vehicles can still be driven. If not, we'll cram more people on board. If the command center still has no information, we must leave here as soon as possible, Augustus said as he walked out of the carriage and called the other soldiers on the platform to get off. Although the soldiers on the upper floor hesitated because of the bloody and flying limbs, they looked at Augustus and finally got off. With a grim look on their faces, they cleaned up the wreckage of the assault cavalry, the weapons on the ground, and the vehicles covered with wreckage and blood. The temporary squad leaders of each squad rushed over to report the casualties to Augustus. This was obviously an unusually successful victory, because after the battle, this platoon of recruits did not even have a minor injury or a scratch. At this time, Omo rushed down from one side of the platform and ran towards Augustus. Augustus had previously arranged for him to take care of the wounded and pay attention to the messages on the radio transceiver. Augustus could only pray in his heart that Omo brought good news. Pox Pride Command Center sent a message 5 minutes ago. The nearest to us is a scout company. Their number is 3423. The command center said that this company will arrive in 15 minutes at the earliest. Omo ran to Augustus and said breathlessly, "Thank God." Raynor breathed a sigh of relief. "How is the seriously injured soldier? Where is Lieutenant Warfield?" Augustus asked. Lieutenant Warfield is still the same, unconscious, but still breathing. Omo's face fell. The seriously injured soldier is about to die. He fainted several times. I'm worried that he won't wake up next time. Jim, you come to clean up the mess and rearrange the sentry. Augustus gave Raynor an order and followed Omo back to the waiting hall where the wounded were placed. There was only Xander who stayed behind, and a pile of medical bags and medical boxes that were turned upside down. Squad leader, I can't save him. Xander's eyes were wet. He knelt in front of the seriously injured man lying on the stretcher and wiped his eyes uncontrollably. You are neither a doctor nor a savior. You tried your best, Xander. It was the damned Kel-morians who took him away, not you. Augustus knelt on one knee beside the soldier, who had closed his eyes. His young face was still so calm. What did he say in the last moments? I want to know his wish. He said he was going to die. He said he was turning into a snowflake. The wind from his hometown took him away. Xander cried as he spoke. He was so kind and emotional that he could not bear the pain of losing his comrade in arms even though they had never spoken before today. Xander Maximum was born in the slums of Tarsinus City and grew up there. He was half illiterate because he had never been to school since he was a child. But even so, Xander did not become more and more indifferent like other people in the slums. On the contrary, he still loved this world. Augustus' noble classmates often called people in the slums untouchables, but he never thought so. He believed that birth could never determine the virtues a person possessed. Chapter 24. Promotion to Lance Corporal. Venice District, Pride of POC, June 11th, 2488. The 5th Battalion, 4th Brigade, 33rd Ground Assault Division, Terran Federation. It had been a few days since Augustus first arrived in this ruined city. Although there were some setbacks along the way, he and his comrades were finally alive. Lieutenant Warfield was sent to the Pride of POC Officers Hospital, and no new news has been received so far. The commander of the Imperial Reconnaissance Company that came to rescue was very surprised. As a new recruit who had never had any combat experience, Augustus could lead a platoon of new recruits who had also never been on the battlefield to defeat a squad of Kel-morian assault cavalry. In the eyes of the commander, it was God's blessing that the new recruits did not collapse on the spot and disband on the spot when they encountered the enemy without anyone to command them. The commander of the reconnaissance company gave a high evaluation of Augustus's ability to respond on the spot and said that he would report the truth, and the Marine Corps command would be happy to give him a Medal of Honor. The recruit platoon that Augustus was originally in was supposed to be reorganized by the Military Affairs Department and assigned to various companies of the 5th Battalion, but in the end it was changed to retain its organization and assigned to the 3rd Platoon of the 1st Company of Warfield, which had suffered the most casualties, and the organization was still the 1st Combat Squad. His platoon leader was a young second lieutenant named Regan Streecher, a thin-faced black-haired man who was neat and tidy, and also an old subordinate of Warfield. Years of war have led to a serious shortage of grassroots non-commissioned officers who have received officer education and professional training, so the squad leader of the 1st Squad is still Augustus, who was once a recruit sergeant. A week later, Warfield will select officers or directly promote a group of non-commissioned officers from privates first class to serve as squad leaders of these recruit squads. In the next few days, Augustus was busy writing a report on the example of his commanding the recruit platoon to defeat the assault rangers. This performance report will eventually be submitted to a second-class sergeant major of the 5th Battalion to fill his empty resume as a recruit. During this period, his company stayed at the garrison to rest and did not perform any military missions. This period of time was very peaceful for the soldiers, except for the occasional Avengers and bomber groups flying over the base and heading to the distance. There was no sound of gunfire near the base. During this period, Augustus and his comrades received training from Lieutenant Regan, the leader of the 3rd Platoon, aimed at running in and improving combat capabilities. During the training, Lieutenant Regan also told the recruits about the history and glorious achievements of the 33rd Ground Assault Division. When Regan praised their division commander Augustus Mengsk with reverence as a fair, upright, selfless and fearless outstanding commander and strategic great man, Augustus felt very embarrassed, no matter what identity or angle he looked at this matter. In general, Regan is actually a very easy to get along person. He is an excellent Marine officer who can not only execute the orders of his superiors tirelessly and meticulously, but also has a humorous and friendly manner of speaking, and can get along well with his soldiers. Augustus got along well with Regan, and they soon became good friends. The only problem was that the lieutenant seemed to care a lot about his surname Mengsk. However, Augustus's comfortable life in the barracks changed on June 11th because Lieutenant Warfield was discharged from the hospital and returned to the command sequence. Warfield called Augustus to his company office in the afternoon of that day and handed him a dark green military badge with 3 vertically arranged, reversed V signs. "Congratulations, you are now Lance Corporal Sergeant Mengsk, this is your new ID card." Warfield also handed Augustus a bronze medal and a golden wheat ribbon. On the medal was a beautifully carved, sharp-eyed eagle head profile, with the words Medal of Honor written in small English letters. In the promotion system of the Federal Army, this Medal of Honor is usually awarded to officers who are brave in combat and are about to be promoted. In some cases, this medal can also offset the merit or test points required for a promotion. Augustus noticed that the large wound on Warfield's head had scabbed over, but he was still energetic and his eyes were bright. There were not many documents on the lieutenant's desk, but it was filled with disassembled pistol and rifle parts. Behind Warfield stood a young soldier carrying a slender rifle. He had dazzling golden hair, a narrow chin, thin lips, and the distance between his eyes was larger than that of an ordinary person, which made him look uncoordinated. In addition, the sniper badge on his chest and his eagle-like sharp blue eyes were impressive. "Lieutenant, I'm relieved to see that you are safe." Augustus said a few polite words when he took over the rank badge and medal. "Haha, thanks to you." Warfield showed a relieved smile, and he praised without hesitation. "Without your command, how could those new recruits become such vicious wolves? You saved me and everyone in the new recruit platoon. This is a miracle, and the staff highly appreciates your heroic deeds." For a new recruit who has just graduated, it is commendable to be able to organize a new recruit platoon in the absence of a commander's command without letting them collapse and flee or surrender collectively. Augustus Mengsk already possesses the most important qualities as a sergeant or even an officer commander. In the process of leading the second platoon of new recruits to finally defeat the Kel-morian assault cavalry squadron, each of his orders was by no means redundant. Augustus Mengsk's genius, military talent and strategic foresight have already been revealed in this operation. Augustus could hear that this should be the comment given to him by a Marine Corps staff officer on the report and himself, and Warfield just repeated it directly. "You deserve this." Warfield looked at Augustus and said, "As for the batch of Ardeen crystals you seized, our supply sergeant is still evaluating the value, and the bonus will be included in the salary of all the new recruits next month. The 33rd Ground Assault Division is different from other troops. There will never be officers who embezzle money. Thank you for everything you have done for me." Just as Augustus' expression showed, he was really happy. Originally, he thought that under the normal process, it would take at least 3 months for him to be promoted from a private first class to a private first class. "By the way, your brother, Colonel Augustus Mengsk, will arrive at Tillysis 2nd next week," Warfield said to Augustus, as if he suddenly remembered something. To this, Augustus did not react, but just nodded calmly. "Then I want to introduce you to the new member of your class, Private Rick Kidd, who is a recruit of the same period as you. In this period, he is the best recruit sniper." Warfield looked at the recruit next to him at this time. "Take him to report to your superior. Now we are comrades." Augustus shook hands with Rick Kidd, who came over. On the way back to the first squad dormitory, Rick seemed a little reserved and taciturn, and only answered a few words when Augustus asked him questions. Augustus was carefully reading Rick's recruit resume, the training camp instructor's recommendation letter, and a paper P1 document. These materials all pointed to the same point, that is, although the recruit Rick had never touched a firearm before joining the army and did not show any talent or ability in sniping in the first 2 weeks, after receiving such training, Rick obtained the sniper badge in just 8 weeks of the boot camp. Before that, only 2 people in the previous boot camps had received such an honor, and without exception, these 2 people graduated from the only sniper academy in Tarsinus. Thanks to Alci, Dazauchasruk, Umawahahazar, elite human soldiers, Yixian Heo book friends, The Way of Destruction, Dreams, Morning Wind, and Zarastad for their monthly tickets. Thanks to Clement 001, Agent Rangrong, Dreams, and Morning Wind for their awards. Thanks for the investment, and thanks for the recommendation votes. Chapter 25 Psychic. As for Rick Kidd, as a sniper, would join an ordinary Marine squad. This is understandable. Although the Federal Marine Corps usually builds a special tactical team around snipers, to perform more secret missions. Rick, as a new recruit, obviously lacks the qualifications. Only after accumulating a certain amount of actual combat experience and military merits to prove his ability, and obtaining the Marine Corps Sniper Qualification Certificate, can Rick form or join a special tactical team on his own. Among all the comments and reports about Rick, Augustus was most concerned about several comments given by the training camp instructor Sergeant Peters. He has a pair of eagle-like sharp eyes, extraordinary hand-eye coordination, and an extremely rare X-factor. Regarding the X-factor in the comments, Sergeant Peters gave a very detailed note in brackets. This kind of talent is extremely rare in our group, usually only about 1 in 1,000 to 10,000 people. X-Factor's ability in sniping is manifested in an inexplicable sniping intuition. Some snipers with this talent even claim that the passage of time slows down significantly in the first 2 to 3 seconds before they pull the trigger, which is obviously related to supernatural phenomena. We don't know much about this talent, but geneticists believe that this special ability hidden in some humans is related to some kind of psychic power. It is certain that the part crossed out by the signature pen, a research project on psychic power, had been launched long before the military. In some remote areas that are too far away from the core world to communicate with the civilized world, the locals call psychic power witchcraft, and religious beliefs based on this and new gods and religions are countless. At present, we can confirm that the new recruiter kid is a rare psychic. Combined with Augustus's past understanding of StarCraft, Rick's psychic power should not be strong. In his impression, only those with C psychic power level set by the federal government, level 5 or above, have telepathic ability. Rick, I'm sorry to offend you, but I want to confirm that as a psychic, can you read minds? Of course, the more official name should be telepathy. Augustus turned his head and looked at Rick, who was confused by his words. In other words, can you hear the voice of others and understand their thoughts? Why do you ask that? Of course I can't. Rick was stunned for a few seconds and thought seriously for a while before answering. He already knew the content of the report, so he was not surprised by what Augustus said. Oh, about your P1 report mentioning psychic power, I heard that all psychics can read minds, and even if others don't speak, they can know what they are thinking. Augustus said, I really can't do that. Rick shook his head. Do you care about this? Yes, but I don't hate psychics and psychics. Augustus said frankly, I'm just not used to someone who can read my thoughts at any time staying around me. It makes me feel uncomfortable. At least, if you are reading my thoughts, at least let me know it. I can understand that privacy of thought is also very important to humans. Rick tried to look at the problem from Augustus' perspective according to what he said, and found that he couldn't stand such a telepath either. If there is no privacy between people, it would be terrible. Your psychic level should not be too high, so you don't show many supernatural abilities. Augustus put all the materials back into the bag. I heard that some powerful psychics can be called living gods. They can see the deepest filth in your heart at a glance, control your thoughts, enslave your soul, or directly detonate your head. That sounds like magic. Rick showed a puzzled look, but the education I received since childhood tells me that the laws of the universe, science, and physics support the operation of this world. During this period, human psychics represented by ghost agents in the original game had not yet appeared in the public's field of vision, so it is not surprising that Rick did not know much about it. Psychic potential is common among human populations in the Korhal sector, and all research related to psychic power seems to prove that this potential is inherited from their ancestors. Moreover, psychic power seems to be evidence that humans are constantly evolving, and it is slowly being strengthened as generations of humans reproduce. However, so far, overly powerful psychics often cannot control their overly powerful psychic powers due to mental problems when they are young, and thus hurt themselves or others. A considerable number of psychics died prematurely in childhood. Rick's psychic power is quite standard, not too powerful, but he has some special abilities that ordinary people do not have. You are right. Augustus spread his hands, took out his personal terminal, and took out a group photo of the first class when they graduated from the boot camp, ready to end the previous topic. Let's not talk about this. You are a new member. Let me introduce you to the people in the first class of the third row, in case you don't know their bad habits and get into trouble later. Okay. Rick nodded. I'm the temporary squad leader, Augustus Mengsk, a Korhal IV, and my family is considered a noble. Augustus pointed to himself and then pointed to his personal terminal, the one with messy and dirty red hair, whose mouth stretches to the back of his head when he laughs, is Hank. But don't be fooled by that. You'd better not mess with him. This is Jim Raynor, a black-haired boy with a crew cut. He looks a little too serious in front of the camera, but actually he's trying not to laugh. He's a very easy to get along with guy. Tomomo is the youngest among us. Although he's shy and clumsy, he's a boy with a great personality. He often talks in his sleep at night, saying that his dream is to protect his fellow villagers. Xander Maximum, look, although he's small, he has a very long chin. I always say he looks like an alien. He likes grenades, explosions, and cigarettes. Look, he doesn't even pinch out his cigarette, but when facing the camera, this child with dark brown hair loves to laugh, and his smile is really sunny. He's a good kid, and can never refuse others' requests for help. Oh, his name is Amy Brandon, and we all call him Little Amy. Augustus held a personal terminal, and introduced each member of his class to Rick with a smile on his face. Connor Ward and Benjamin Crandall are the biggest guys here. They both have bad tempers, and don't like to laugh. However, when Ward is angry, he will sulk on his own, and Crandall will beat up the person who angered him. He is a monk, and he always prays and says hallelujah before taking action. Augustus said, Kate Josephine's current flathead is not bad. When he was in high school, he had long pink hair and tied it in braids. This bastard is a playboy, a dandy, and a scum. No matter what you say to him, he will smile when he sees you, and he will not be angry or annoyed. I have never seen Josephine angry. Augustus looked at Rick while talking. If the other party didn't want to listen and felt bored, he would stop there. When Rick looked at Augustus, he smiled back reflexively, and Augustus thought that he was willing to listen to his nagging. Although Alan Grunstein's family is a noble family, 3 generations ago, they were all artists, painters, and musicians. He is the one who looks most like an aristocrat among us. Ilya Kulovsky was born in the frozen world of Brasis. In the local area, his name means the hand of God. He is the one who can drink the most strong liquor in our class, and he is also the bravest soldier. I can't believe that such a good guy like him would get carsick, and only carsick on motorcycles. Augustus said. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.